Perfect. Welcome everybody to our special meeting of council. Today's Thursday, May 28th. We are doing this meeting seated separately, but all gathered on the traditional territories of the Coast and Strait Salish peoples, specifically the Lekwungen speaking people known today as the Esquimalt and the Songhees First Nations, and recognize that their connections to these lands continue to this day. And of course, we are live streaming this because this is the only way any of you are watching. So with that, we'll kick off our meeting. We are starting a couple minutes late. The time is now 12:21 p.m. My mayor's remarks are brief. I do want to just express my appreciation to staff. Again, staff are extraordinarily busy as we are transitioning from phase one of the recovery, or sort of the lockdown state, to phase two. And all that entails for both our operations, the operations of businesses in our community, and particularly our Parks and Recs department, as we try and enable as many services as possible while keeping the community and our staff safe. I just want to acknowledge as well, just in the community, how well people are coming together and finding small ways of keeping their connections and celebrating. We have quite a few people out in the evenings banging pots and pans in support of essential workers. We have Stephanie Greaves, who's doing lawn concerts or lawncerts, that she's just showing up and doing concerts on people's lawns to raise their spirits. And we've had a number of them in Oak Bay, and I just want to express my appreciation to Ms. Greaves for that work. It does a lot to raise the spirits of the community. I've seen one of them, and boy, everybody's sure smiling and singing along and having a great time. So thank you for that. You just want to remind you that you will see ambassadors from the Parks and Rec department out and about on our beaches and parks, just to remind people to keep social distancing as much as possible. I also want to just let people know who are watching at home that June 5th will mark the end date of the secondary drop-off site for the recycling and, the garden waste and garbage. We opened that secondary site to deal with some of the pressures on the public works yard. But as we move to reopen our Parks and Rec department, that space will become required again for parking for that area. So that will be happening. So if you have things to drop off, please do it before June the 5th. And I think that's all my comments for today. Just really appreciate everybody's hard work and during these strange times, but certainly looking forward to getting to this agenda today. And it's nice to see everybody's faces again here on the screen. So welcome. Item number 2 on the agenda is a tender award for the supply and delivery of a refuse collection truck, and I believe we have Mr. Brozick here with us to answer any questions. And if you could just give a quick introduction of this item. I believe it's either Mr. Brozick or Mr. Payne. I'm not sure who's presenting this particular piece.
I could do it. Dave Brozick here.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi there. The district issued a request for a proposal for the supply and delivery of a garbage truck. This piece of equipment we use on a daily basis picks up all the household garbage from curbside. Prior to putting out the request for proposal, an evaluation was determined the ideal capacity of the truck, which was 27 cubic yards. There was a little bit of flexibility in the request for proposal, 27 to 29 cubic yards. The new truck will be lighter, more maneuverable, and more fuel efficient. The request for proposal was out for a total of 5 weeks, and we got one request for proposal back from Rollins, and we recommend that option.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brozick. Are there questions to Mr. Brozick or Mr. Payne on this item? Councillor Braithwaite and then Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick question, because I know that only getting one RFP back for this. I'm wondering if it really behooves us to maybe go out again and get another quote, because I'm thinking that perhaps we have the time to be able to do that. And so I'm wondering what staff's concern might be to go out and get another quote. And maybe if they did, maybe the original quote was a little bit too restrictive. And if there was any parameters that they could perhaps change to make it less restrictive, to perhaps be able to get a few more quotes in.
So this is Dan Horan. I was wondering if I could jump in to take this question.
Welcome, Mr. Horan. Yes.
Hey, thank you. So thank you for the question. I think when we do all of our procurement for whether it's public works equipment or contracts or any kind of bidding under the tenders, request for proposals, the process we follow is we lay out our requirements and we do our market survey to figure out like what do we expect that's going to mean in terms of our expected answers back from the market. And then we make a prediction on what we're going to get and what budget we're likely to need for that process. So that's our standard best practice around procurement for across the whole district. And so that's what we did for this particular requirement. So in this case, getting one bid back doesn't necessarily represent anything negative, actually, because it did get the truck meets our requirements. It's lower than the budget we expected, so it meets our needs. And in fact, the chances are higher that if we were to go back out, part of the reason why there are less bids out there is many of the other options are actually more expensive. So what we're looking for in this procurement process is something that meets our needs, something that's affordable for the requirements we're asking for, and something that's fair and open in terms of a process. So in this case, that's what we think the process resulted in, and that's why we're making the recommendation we're making. I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I I have Councillor Zelka, then Councillor Patterson.
Oh, thank you very much. I had a similar concern to Councillor Braithwaite. I checked on BC Bid and see that it was posted on the 1st of November, renewed on the 25th, and then finalized on December the 6th. I imagine it would be quite rather difficult if we tried to repost that, especially since this information is now public. And so I will be supporting this. I appreciate the fact that staff is using the appropriate tools, BC Bid, and that this is made available to BC. And I understand Alberta bidders as well. Thank you for doing your best. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and through you to staff. This number 97 garbage truck, I remember it from 2018 budget because I asked a question about the 97 garbage truck at that time. What's the useful life of this piece of equipment?
I'll put it out to whoever feels appropriately able to respond to that.
The appropriate life is approximately 10 years. We extended it another 2 years actually, because in 2018 we had a major breakdown and put in some major costs into the unit and got 2 more useful years out of it.
Okay.
So just add this. Sorry, it's Dan here. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. It's hard for me not to raise my hand to be like, how do I jump in to add?
Well, I try and leave a little gap for people to do just that. So go ahead, Mr. Horan.
Apologize for the protocol confusion. Just to add to Mr. Rose's comments too, the plan is, so we have the 10-year life cycle is where our vehicle renewal program, so the transfers from reserves in year for this purchase is, we're expecting again to replace this vehicle within 10 years. I think, yeah, that's what I think that's what Mr. Brozick said. They're trying to add, we have the two vehicles and we're staggering the replacements for those two.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you. That answered my question. It's just that I did ask about this truck back in 2018, and that's why I was surprised to see it. I should just also add: are we supposed to raise our hand on the screen, or are we using the sidebar hand?
If you could use the screen, I'm not looking at the sidebar. So if you raise your hand on the sidebar, it goes, and I get a text from Ms. Hopkins to let me know there's a hand raised, and that gets a bit circular. So
thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Councillor Zelka, you wanted to follow up?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity for a follow-up. I noticed when I was up on BC Bid, there's another bid up there for residential organics collection services. Appears to be either a service or a truck. I wasn't quite sure. Is there any opportunity to combine these two trucks so that there's only one truck roll? Or ideally, I know at this moment it seems to be 3 trucks seem to come almost every day or every garbage day. It seems. I'm not quite sure. If you could clarify, that would be great.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Zelka. I'm assuming Mr. Horan, you'd probably be the best person to answer this question.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So the way that the district has sets up their level of service for curbside pickup is the organics is under contract, so it's contracted out. which for the last several years has been to a specific contractor, which the contract expires at the end of this year. So we've gone out for requests for proposals to renew the service on a 3-year term starting in January. So we're just waiting for those responses back, and that's the contract, the request for proposal, Mr. Zelka, that you would have seen on BC Bid.
I think the question, Mr. Haran, was just whether there was an opportunity to combine those trucks. Like, could one truck pick up garbage, compost, recycling?
So what we're doing is we haven't changed. We haven't changed the way that we provide these services to the district. We could certainly look at that in the future, but just off the top of my head, what we would have to look at in that case is the comments that Mr. Brozick was making about a truck being able to be smaller, for example. Would not be the case if we were combining the services. We would have service level. In terms of resources, how many people we require and how many trucks we require, we'd have to look at that again to see if we can maintain our current level of service. So our direction in terms of where we're going for our levels of service is to stay the same in terms of provide the same service that we have been providing. So we haven't made any changes in that respect in terms of our plans. So the RFP that's on the street at the moment reflects that that consistency in our service levels.
Okay, thank you. I would suggest worth keeping an eye on ways of adapting our services to reduce costs or reduce carbon output and so forth. But appreciate this. We're dealing with a truck purchase at this time, so a little bit of a wide-ranging conversation, but still appropriate, I think, and worth asking the question. So thank you, Councillor Zelka. Any other questions at this time? I guess the only question I had was sort of touches on something that Councillor Braithwaite asked, which was, did the size range, do you think doing the market survey, was that a reasonable range? Like, did 27 to 29 cubic yards cut off large scale providers that make a 26 liter or 26 cubic yard truck or larger, that would have limited the size of the available respondents?
I'll jump in and start, and then Mr. Brozick, if I don't cover the full answer, then by all means jump in at the end. Based on our market survey, what we're seeing is the likely competitors out there are offering bigger, more feature-heavy trucks and consequently more expensive trucks. So we don't believe that the differences in terms of potential bidders were around the volume sizes. It's around the other features and ability that the trucks provide. So there's levels of automation that are available. There's capacity issues like much greater than what we were talking about. So in terms of trying to figure out, from a broad perspective, whenever we're trying to procure, whether it's a service or a good or piece of equipment, we're trying to follow procurement practices that make sure that we get the best value for money and that we're transparent and competitive. And so this process from beginning to end meets that. So what we're seeing is more a reflection of what the market is going to provide for us, rather than an indicator that we need to change our requirements or our practices.
Okay, and then just last question. There is the total of this is it wasn't entirely clear from the report. The total is very close to the budgeted amount. However, it does not include the warranty, which would be included in that budgeted amount. Is that correct? So do we know what the warranty additive cost would be to this total?
Just to make it clear on Zoom, I'm going to have to ask Mr. Brozick to step in on that one. I'm not sure what the answer to that question is.
Mr. Brozick? If you're speaking, yeah, there we go.
I am just looking for that here. It is the warranties that we are going to get are not overly costly. In this case, we're going to choose probably a lower package warranty because we have our mechanics are very familiar with doing repairs associated with these garbage trucks.
Do you have just an order of magnitude sort of amount that would be? Is it like 2,000, 100,000? What's sort of the range we're talking about here?
Under 5,000.
Okay.
We're looking at probably around, oh, here, I got it here. Well, we're looking at probably either the 4-year or the 5-year warranty, and depending on the different options we can choose, it's between 3,300 and 51.
Okay, so
So
it still keeps it within the range of the budget. That was the nature of my question. So thank you for that, Mr. Brozick. And Councillor Patterson, you had your hand up again. Go ahead. You're on mute though. Councillor Patterson, you're on mute.
Won't come on. Oh, there. Okay.
There.
Came on. Sorry, my computer's working very slow today. Just to follow up on your question, Mr. Mayor, about the truck was sized differently, if we would get more competitive bids. I'm wondering about residual value, if there is any residual value to these vehicles, and that would follow too. So if it was a more standardized size, would that affect the residual value? There might not be after truck is this one I guess would be 12 years old, the existing one.
Mr. Brozick or Mr. Haran?
I don't think that Dave here, Mr. Brozick, I don't think that that would really affect the cost or what we would get back. When it comes to these garbage trucks, one thing is that they come in 2 separate parts. So Rollins is the distributor, and they're the ones that put in the proposal. So there's 2 parts to the garbage truck. There's the cabin chassis, and then there's the garbage body. So when it comes to the garbage body, LeBray is basically the only player in British Columbia. So they have 100% of the market share in automated collection vehicles. So then Rollins, as the authorized distributor in BC, they source out the cabin chassis. So they can look at the different players like Mack, Freightliner, International, all the different trucks that are out there. And then they look at our specs, which was 11 pages of specs, and they pair that cabin chassis with the body. So given those factors and not many players involved, I think that we're actually getting quite good value.
Okay, thank you. Anything follow up, Councillor Patterson?
No, I thank you for that very detailed analysis of how the truck is put together. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there, if there's no other questions, we can take a motion and we can speak to the motion.
I'll make the motion.
Is you moving the recommendation?
Second.
Yes.
Okay, so
Oh,
just for
sorry.
clarification, the motion is the recommendation that do you mind do you have it in front of you? If someone does, could they just read it aloud? Because I think it's important for the record to have this here, that the contract for the supply and delivery.
Hang on. I've got it, Kevin. That the contract for the supply and delivery of the refuse collection truck be awarded to Rollins Machinery Limited in accordance with their request for proposal submission in the amount of $351,503.
And there was a seconder? Seconded.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Item number 3 on the agenda, we have a tender award for asphalt resurfacing program. Again, Mr. Haran or Mr. Brozick, whoever wishes to, can take this on. Just do a quick overview.
Sure, I'll do it. Dave here. So we put out for tender our asphalt resurfacing program. There are 2 main players within the area here, Capital City Paving and Island Asphalt. The tender was for approximately 13,000 square meters at various locations throughout Oak Bay. The scope of work in the tender process was sort of close to last year's totals, but we have the right to go up to the full budgetary amount. And actually, with this tender, we put 3 one-year extensions if possible, and I think because of that, as well as the amount of the works that we're going to be doing, we actually have a 2.89% lower rates than last year, which is very good. So it's recommended that it gets awarded to Island Asphalt.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Brozick. Are there any questions of Mr. Brozick or Councillor Zelka, then Councillor Patterson?
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to ask, I guess, two questions, or one question and one comment. Who is the current provider of the asphalt milling and overlay? And number two is, whoever's doing it seems to be doing a great job, at least on Oak Bay Avenue. I'm very impressed at coming out of this long couple of months slumber and finding the streets in amazing shape. I just want to compliment your team as well. Thank you.
Mr. Bruzek or Mr. Haran, who's the current provider?
It would be Island Asphalt right now.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Patterson? Oh, sorry, Councillor Zelka. Oh, you already said your question and comment. Perfect. Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just for an understanding of this, in the 29 budget package, it was called the Pavement Management Program. In the 2020 budget package, it was called a roads program. So I think they're consistent. I realize that the asphalt is probably one component of the pavement management, roads management plan. And just could we have confirmation that the asphalt portion of it that is presented here is consistent with what was in that overall roads management budget for the 2020 budget? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. I'll give this to Mr. Haran. I think would probably have the best answer for that, or Mr. Payne.
Yeah, I'll jump in. And Councillor Patterson, I actually hadn't noticed any change of what you're referring to, but maybe my answer will still help clarify. So this used to be as a budget line item, and still might be. It was called in the past pavement management strategy, and it's generally gone up and up each year. So with this year being at 1.1, the 1,100,000. So it's generally the asphalt road surfacing work that we do each year, which has gradually increased since about 2015. So I hope that, and it might just be a matter of with our new director of finance and the new process to put together a 5-year financial plan in terms of new documents, we might have tweaked the wording, but it means the same for us. So this particular contract is directly related to road rehabilitation and the asphalt contracts known as which we lump under pavement management strategy.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. I don't see any other questions. If we can get a motion, then we can speak to the motion. And again, because it's a contract award, if you could just have someone read out the wording.
I
I'll
can
move that. Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Okay, thank you. Move staff recommendation that the contract for the asphalt resurfacing and miscellaneous concrete program be awarded to Island Asphalt Company in accordance with their tender submission in the amount of $815,000.
Great, and seconded by Councillor Braithwaite. And any other discussion or questions at this time? I'm not seeing any, then I will call the question. All those in favor? Looking for hand, and any opposed? Obviously not. All the hands are up for in favor, so that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We are now moving on to item number 4, which is a traffic control order 2020-16, and I believe this would be Mr. Haran. Mr. Haran.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was having finger problems trying to unmute there. So what we're asking for is just as from a request from community groups and in consultation with Parks, Recreation, Culture staff to look at the makeup of how much parking spaces there are at Martinrea Center. We felt it was necessary and needed to convert some spaces for disabled parking, and just based on the streets and traffic bylaw and the delegated authorities, I just need to come to council to have that approval from you folks so that we can go make that happen. And that's our recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions of Mr. Haran on this item? Councillor Appleton? Yeah.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to staff. My question pertained to sort of what precipitated the request to dedicate the spots, and this is driven through the Parks, Rec, and Culture group. I'm just wondering whether or not it's a shared parking facility with, of course, the adjacent library, and I'm just wondering whether or not there was any contact made or any communications with the library to discuss whether or not that was a suitable improvement for them as well.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Mr. Haran?
Thank you for the question. Unfortunately, I can't confirm that we did. That would be normal practice for us to do, but I don't recall, like I didn't personally do that, and whether my team that was working on it, whether we did, I don't recall. But I would recommend though, yeah, I'll quickly go check that and make sure they're in the loop. But I don't recommend delaying necessarily for that purpose, because we're hoping to get this whatever construction work we need to do done while the parking lot usage is lower. That's my hope on that one.
Thank you, Mr. Horan. Councillor Appleton?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. That's fine. I don't have any concerns with the dedication of the parking spots per se, to increase accessibility. I was just wondering about just sort of what the typical mode of communication was and what the protocol was for that.
Okay, thank you. So if it was not previously, if notice did not previously go to the library for their input, perhaps, Mr. Horan, if you could just follow up and make sure that that is done, just to give them notice. And if they have any concerns, to let us know, and we can consider that at that time. But just as a courtesy, I think that's an appropriate course of action. If it has, it probably has already been done. I appreciate that is part of our normal course of action. But if it hasn't, if you wouldn't mind just owning that piece, that would be great. I don't think.
Yes, Your Worship, absolutely, and I think that would be, this is standard practice. Like, we should have done that. I just couldn't confirm for sure that we had actually done it in this case, and so I'll absolutely take that direction and close the loop there. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I appreciate you just, I'm sure it was done actually, but I appreciate you just not, since you don't know for sure, being willing to just say that. So thank you for that. Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much, Chair. I understand the Oak Bay Volunteer Services is in process to move to this facility, and I'm wondering whether they would, as a result, become a stakeholder who might be interested in knowing about this as well. I would just put that out as a suggestion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Zelka. Any other discussion, questions? I'll need a motion if you want to, and we can have a debate at that point. As someone can make, you don't need to read this one out. You can just say move to staff recommendations. It's an internal matter.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion or further questions? I'm not seeing any, so we'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Item number 5 on the agenda is the grant and aid approval process. We didn't send this out in a table format, so we're just going to go through these sort of quickly one by one. The total grant ask is lower than the grant amounts in our budget, but we still have our responsibility of reviewing these on a one by one basis. So if people can just pull up their sheets, that would be great. And we will just go through these, I think hopefully fairly quickly, one by one. I'm just going to pull up my secondary note here as well, just so I have it. And so I think procedurally, the simplest thing is just go through them line by line. But before I do that, I'll just hand this over to Mr. Payne to do a quick introduction. And if he has any additional comments, we can have those, and then we can go get to the line items themselves. Mr. Payne.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Council will call at the April 23rd council meeting. Council approved the grant approval process this year and elected to approve applications line by line, given that requests did not exceed the budget. So currently requests total $57,900. A number of applications were withdrawn due to the current pandemic. On a total budget of $77,700. So that's room to the tune of $19,800. Council will also recall at the March 12th committee meeting, which was a budget meeting, the committee recommended that the Francophone grant be considered separately from the normal grant process. And that grant application totaled $30,000. Staff have been in contact with the Francophone Games organizers, and they're agreeable to splitting that grant request over 2 fiscal years. So if council should choose, we could approve a $15,000 grant application this year and a $15,000 grant application next year, and we could use our discretionary grant budget to fund that this year, given that we've got some extra room And that would also leave approximately $4,800 left should council receive some, ad hoc grant applications from now until the end of the year. So staff recommendation, subject of course to council line by line approval, is to approve the requests and also approve $15,000 for the Francophone Games this year and $15,000 for the Francophone Games next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Payne, for that. I had a hand up from Councillor Green and Councillor Patterson. I will go to you first before we get to the individual line items. Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Oh, thank you very much. And thank you very much, Mr. Payne, for the report and the line items. I just had a sort of a general process question around the Francophony grant, not whether or not we should provide support, but if they don't go ahead with the games next year either, can you tell me what happens to our contribution? Do we reclaim it if the games in fact don't occur either? Obviously they're not occurring this year, and if they don't occur next year either, is that grant money gone, or can we reclaim it and then divert the funds to other needs here in our community? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. I think a question on top of mine for a lot of these applications, actually, of these. So, Mr. Payne, what is the process here for grants that may or may not actually happen?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for the question, Councillor Green. Grant applicants are required to certify that they'll use the funds for the intended purpose that's outlined in their application, and they are required to return those funds if they don't proceed with what's outlined in the application. And that has happened before, although it's not often. Obviously, we're living in unprecedented times with the pandemic and the uncertainty that relates to that. So we'll be connecting with applicants prior to issuing the funds. And we in fact did check with them and say, do you intend on still continuing with what's proposed in your applications? The ones that are before you did confirm that they do, but that could change. So they are required to return the funds if they don't use it, which could be a risk in terms of collections, but not that has been realized so far.
Just a supplementary follow-up, and thank you, Mr. Payne. So specific to the grant itself, when they describe how the funds are going to be used, is it very specific? And therefore, are we able to verify ultimately what the funds are being used for? And I don't mean to sound like the Grinch, but I just want to make sure that, this is a substantial amount of money. Will we, any organization, if the grant application is generic enough or vague enough, it could be that they will spend some of the money on development, on administration, that kind of thing. Was this grant more specific than that? And in fact, was this money identified as being used to support the actual games? I'm sure you know what I'm getting at, and I appreciate your patience. Thank you.
Mr. Payne, how do we determine whether or not it's been used or not?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the question, Councillor Green. As it turns out, most of the grant applications, and as it is the case for the Francophone Games, they are linked to very clear deliverables. Most of the applications are very closely linked to projects, so it becomes very obvious whether or not that occurred. In fact, if you want to review the appendix to the report, there's a brief description of what the grant funds would be used for. Most of them are very clear: an exhibition, an event, a project, a capital purchase. So it's easy to determine whether or not that in fact did occur. There is some program funding occasionally that council can approve, but I would say in the case of the Francophone Games, that's not the case here. It is for an event.
I really appreciate that, and please don't misunderstand that I'm targeting the Francophone Games. That's not the case. I'm more concerned about the amount of the grant and how we track it. Thank you very much for your help.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Councillor Patterson.
Sorry, I have a very weak signal here, so it's cutting in and out. You'd all disappear and then it comes back. So, but this is a follow-up. And certainly Councillor Green asked questions that were foremost in my mind. I understand also with the Francophonie Games that a lot of the participants that would have participated in this year's event will not qualify to participate in next year's event, which means that they really have to, I guess, start from scratch again and attracting attendees for the event, participants, which could be difficult, I presume. And so I also am concerned about issuing the money and collecting it back if that goes south. And I'm just wondering if there is now, Mayor, I believe that you attend the meetings with the working committee, perhaps electronically now, but you might perhaps we might get updates along the way of how successful they are at the continuation of bringing this event forward for next year. And I'm sure they're not going to know that for a bit of time. But I'm just wondering if there's any follow-up in between so that we can kind of have a better idea of the use of the funds and whether we will recover any of them if they don't go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. There's no working group that or committee that I'm part of for this. I just get updates from them, and then they have events and updates. I get invited to those, which are pretty few and far between at this point. They're still very much in the putting it together phase. I do think, though, it's interesting. I think their total budget is around 1.8 million. So the $30,000 is not the significant piece of this. It's important, though. They are actually down to those numbers to make it work. However, I think the big structural dollars are being provided through the federal and provincial government for the most part, and so if there's wording in here that once they can confirm it's going ahead, we could release the money, that would probably be acceptable to them as well. Just given the small portion this attends to, and really ties into some of the work needed to kind of get the residences turned up here and so forth to make sure that they're available. So I think if we could provide 100% assurance, it's been approved, it's sitting there, but it won't get released until until the games have been assured that it's going forward, would probably be another model that we could use if it's, but I can't speak for them at this point. That may not work for them. I really don't know.
Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much, Chair. And the numbers you quoted are reasonably accurate. The various press releases that are up on the jefc.ca website talking about all the planning for this particular event. I was very pleased to see in all of the press releases, Oak Bay's logo is and sponsorship is well advertised. Maybe in good traditional way, for a small amount of money for a small district, we're definitely punching above our weight compared to the amount of money donated by these other sponsors, such as the federal government, the provincial government, Saanich, and City of Victoria, and Province of Quebec.
Yes, indeed. We as a proportion of the things, we are pretty small. Is there, so we can deal with the grant and aid for GFC if we want. That's really be the first thing on the agenda. So why don't I do that? If there's no other sort of generalized questions about how we can manage the payment pieces, yeah, Councillor Braithwaite, we'll get to that. Go ahead first.
Thank you, Mayor. I was actually had a few concerns like Councillor Green did. And then when Mr. Payne said that the money would go to anything that's outlined in the application, the first thing that came to my mind was, well, what happens if what's outlined in the application is that the money that we're giving would be used for marketing? And then they would be marketing all this year, so that money would be gone. Then we would be out $15,000 if the games did not go on next year. I, like all of the rest of my council colleagues, sounds like would really like to support this, but maybe it would be better if we pledged conditionally so that then they know they're able to say Oak Bay is going to give us $30,000, but perhaps, and that will help for other funding perhaps, but then we're not out any money if by chance it doesn't go forward. So perhaps that's something that we could consider.
I don't want to get too far into the theoretics of this, and this is, but I think every application is going to be a little bit different, and so we have to answer this question on how we word it individually. But Mr. Payne, given the conversation here, do you have any concerns about working with the applicants to do this in a way that ensures that we can, if the games don't go forward, we're not out the money?
To your worship, no concerns. I'm happy to work with the applicant, and I could take it as general direction if that pleases council. And I'll just correspond with the applicant to ensure that that doesn't create any cash flow concerns for them, or they were counting on it for cash flow. As mentioned, given the size of the event, it's probably not the case. They're probably willing to work with us in that regard. And if they're not, I'll bring it to council's attention and we'll go from there.
Okay, and always when people need it for cash flow, that usually means you can't get it back. So
there's higher risk in that case for sure.
Okay, good enough. I think what I might do is actually treat the Francophonie Games application at the end of this. And the reason I say that, if I look at the gap this year of 19,800, if we find that we get these numbers down somewhat and have a bit more money in the kitty, maybe we could commit this year to the full amount, subject to it being put out. And so why don't we wait and to see where we're at the end of the line by line discussion of the other applications, then we'll come back to the Francophonie Games at the end of that to see how we want to word that particular motion. So with that, we're on to the BC Accordion and Tango Society. And I'm not going to get Mr. Payne to read out what these are. I think we've all had a chance to kind of have a look at it. I think it's worth noting, just for people who weren't here 2 years ago, the BC Accordion and Tango Society hosted the World Accordion and Tango Festival here, and we participated in funding a portion of that for that special event. We seem to be moving on to more operational events going forward, which we typically don't fund as part of our grants piece. Doesn't say we can't, but this is an ask for money to rent the venue. Again, this is similar in some ways that I know Royal McPherson is looking at no performances until 2021. There's a very good chance this won't go forward. So again, I think we need some clarification of the process to ensure that the money, if granted, whatever that amount is, goes appropriately to the is recaptured again. So we don't have any particular structure here in terms of where people are at. So I'm going to have to go around. If anybody has any concerns about funding the full amount being asked for, the $1,500, this is probably the chance. I'm just going to look for hands and we can hear those. So I have Councillor Braithwaite and Councillor Patterson.
Yeah, I think that I would prefer not to fund this one this year. I think that you're correct that this probably won't go ahead. If it did go ahead, I would say that we could perhaps partner with them to use one of our nights that we have at the Dave Dunn Theatre to give them a night instead of us using it, and then to allow them to use it, so it would just have our name attached to it, because I believe that we get 10 or 9 free nights at the Dave Dunn Theatre, and so that would be my preference, not to give them $1,500 cash, but if the event does go ahead, to perhaps have a conversation with them in regards to giving them the space in lieu of a grant.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. I just want to. I'm not sure if we actually have anybody on the meeting here that has the answer to this. My recollection of sharing our time is actually quite complicated. It has to be a municipal event. I think it can't be us getting all those events and then we can just give it to people we want to. I think it actually has to be a municipal type event. So either the debates for candidates and the public hearing and those sorts of things that we've used it for have been used. I believe that's the rule. Councillor Braithwaite, you might have some insight.
I think that what's happened in the past is, and I believe that this has happened for some Rotary events and some KOB events, is that we've actually partnered with them. So it would say District of Oak Bay and BC Tango Society presents whatever, and then it's a partnership. And I think that's how we've gotten around that in the past. I could be wrong.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Mayor. And I think Councillor Braithwaite covered off most of the concerns that I have about this request also, because it really is very operational, which is something I think we would have to really seriously consider maybe policy on. But I guess curiosity, while I have this moment, I can ask, do we understand what the success of the previous accordion and tango event was, the turnout, the response to it? I certainly know from watching Czech News that the accordion supplier in Victoria has done a booming business during pandemic. Who would have known that would have higher sales than ever before on accordions, and is shipping them all over the world. So I don't know if we got any response from them after the event, but I could ask that while I have a moment. Thank you.
I actually didn't get any feedback from them about the success or lack thereof of the event 2 years ago. It was a big global event, so I think it had a different sort of vibe to it than perhaps this one did. But I don't know. Sorry. All right, so we have to do this. We're going to do this motion by motion. So if there's I guess maybe if I don't mind, I'll just say a couple of words here as well on this one. I think a couple of things, and I appreciate this is really hard to go through this and in this way, because we're going to be sort of debating each one individually, which is why the averaging was used in the past. But I think there's a couple of things. One, I think we do have a responsibility to be a bit frugal this year. We're looking at this is a world in quite a bit of turmoil. There's a lot of need out there. We actually don't know what's going to happen, and if there's an opportunity at the end of this year to say host some events, or some of these organizations can spring back and maybe do some things to do some community building towards the end of this year or into next year, having some money set aside to support that makes a lot of sense to me. But just on the principle that when everybody's suffering, to be a bit frugal makes sense. Also, just want to remind that, well, they don't technically set precedents. People expect, if they got 6,000 this year, they kind of expect 6,000 the following year, unless we're very clear in our wording to recipients. That will be the expectation as we go. And I think some of the events that did pull out, the ones that we've had, funded in the past, and some of the community things, they're almost certain to happen next year. And if we're kind of setting precedent this year of spending all of our money on some of these other things, and then when we come back, we might not have those. So for a number of reasons, I think it's just, I don't want to just, forget the fact that we have some responsibility here of being a little bit tight with taxpayers' money on this, because I think there's going to be some other uses for that going forward. And also at the end of it, we have to consider, well, it's not included in our budget, it's still a cost impact of the Francophonie Games. And if we can take advantage of using some of the not spent money for that, that also helps the bottom line at the end of the day. So those are my preamble pieces, but we'll deal with this particular item first. I just need a motion, and then we can talk to that motion in terms of this item.
Okay, so Mayor, could I just make a motion to receive? Would that be the correct thing if I was not in?
No, we would have a motion to allocate money to the BC Accordion Tango Society, and that could be from $0 to their ask amount of $1,500.
Okay, then I'll make a motion to allocate $0 to the BC Accordion and Tango Society.
Or
Second.
Equivalent if declined. It's moved and seconded. So here we have debate. I need a hand for anybody who wishes to speak, if you don't mind. Councillor Ney.
Yeah, I appreciate the expressions of concern to ensure that we're being responsible with our budget in this time when so much is being. We're being extremely abstemious with our budget, but I'm not sure this for me is the place we start pulling back. And a couple things that I'd like to speak to is one is we are opening up generally. We're in our phase 2 around the pandemic, and organizations and businesses, etc., are being encouraged to facilitate opening according to very specific guidelines, and I have a sense that these organizations that are asking for money are doing community building type activities. And so long as they do it in adherence with the guidelines that have been asked, then I don't know if they're going to pursue the proposals that they've made prior to the pandemic. But the way I see this is that we leave it to them, that we give staff the oversight to make the discretionary call that whatever that it is that they're doing are done in accordance to guidelines, and that they are spending the money as per the original proposal. So I think we should go forward. In my view, I would support the application in this instance as is.
Thank you, Councillor Ney. Any other hands to speak to this? Councillor Zelka?
Thank you, Chair. This is hard because during the pandemic, as we're coming back out of phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 into the reopening, I definitely want to support the arts moving forward and be part of this coming back alive. I'm wondering if we do go with the motion that's on the floor to provide $0 here, would we have to have an amendment in order to offer them one of our 10 spaces at the Dave Dunn Theatre, or would that be a separate motion for something like that?
I guess you could. The only thing, you could make an amendment to the motion, I think, to ask. Basically, we'd have to ask if that's even possible. I don't know that we have the answer if that's possible at this time. So the motion would, and I would consider that to be in compliance with that.
That's fine. In that case, I like the suggestion that came from Councillor Braithwaite, and I'd like to put forward that amendment to this motion, that assuming it is available to us to offer, that we can provide one of our 10 evenings at the Dave Dunn Theatre to the BC Accordion and Tango Society for them to put on their event.
Okay, I want to make sure I get the wording right on this one. I think it would be, if I may have to go to Ms. Hopkins here in a second here to get a take on what the wording might be, but I'm just thinking, looking for an amendment to add the words and direct staff to I'm thinking here, suffer scribbling down. I might go to Ms. Varela, who may have, or Ms. Hopkins, who may have a way of sort of wording this in a way that's feasible. Oh, you know what? Council could probably make this as simple as and support the use of municipal booking time if available. And then that would leave it pretty open in terms of whether it was possible or not.
That would be fine. Something as flexible as that, I would be fine with that.
Would that wording work?
For me, it does.
I'm looking here into. I have 2 members of staff in the other end of the room here, who are busy looking at this. Ms. Hopkins, is that something along those lines? I'm not hearing your voice on the audio. There we go.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council can give that direction, and then staff can do the background check, and then if there's any concerns, we can bring that back for further direction from Council.
Okay, I'm not sure that we need it brought back to this table. I think the ask is that not for money, but if we can provide our space, then we would just go ahead and do that. And if we can't, then that's fine. But I think that's the wording that I understand from this motion.
That's the essence of the direction I was hoping to put forward, and hopefully someone will second it.
I want to get wording correct before we get a seconder. I hate that when you say, "Oh, yes, I support that," whatever that was. We want to avoid those kind of motions. I should have had it as something along the lines of sorry for the gap here. This is always a little more awkward when everything has to be done remotely. It's hard for two people to sit on the side and whisper when they can't get within 6 feet of each other. I think we have a suggested wording here from Ms. Hopkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the proposed amendment would read something similar to that: in lieu of the $1,500 grant and aid amount, staff research the possibility of providing the BC Accordion and Tango Society with a one night at the Dave Dennett Theatre. Yes, one night of municipal booking time at the Dave Dennett Theatre.
I think the motion should maybe be a bit more specific. It says, and provide one of the municipal thing if it's possible or if it's if feasible. I just thought that takes it out of the circling back again.
So if we revise that motion, it would read that in lieu of the $1,500 grant and aid amount, staff be directed to provide the BC Accordion and Tango Society with one night at the Dave Dennett Theatre, one night of municipal booking time at the Dave Dennett Theatre if feasible.
I think that reads correctly. If I get Councillor Zelka, you're good with that wording?
I'm good with that. And if you don't need to use the word in kind to replace that, that's fine. I'm fine with it.
Ms. Hopkins, are you satisfied with that wording? Is there a benefit of using the term in kind? I'm getting head shakes. No, it's okay as it is. So is there a seconder for that motion to amend? Is there seconded by Councillor Braithwaite? So we're discussing the amendment to add that language to the motion. Does not preclude, does not dictate whether you'll vote on the final motion with or without that wording. It's just to add that wording to the motion to essentially decline the funding. So is there any discussion on that amendment? Not seeing any. I will call the question then. All those in favor of adding those words, language, hands up. Any opposed? None opposed. So we have that the motion now stands to essentially decline the funding, but provide the municipal time if feasible. I'm paraphrasing, but I think that's the clearest language I can give it at this point. So is there any discussion now on the amended motion as it sits forward? Not seeing any hands, so then I will call the question. All those in favor? And opposed? Is none opposed? None opposed. Okay, thank you very much. We move on to number 2, the Capital Regional Food and Agricultural Initiatives Roundtable. It's $500. Is there, again, I'm just going to go to a motion here. I think it's the simplest thing, and then we can talk to that. Councillor Zelka.
I wish to move approval of the 2020 request for the Capital Regional Food and Agriculture Initiatives Roundtable, $500.
Okay.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this? And I would just ask here, in order just to keep time reasonable, if you have any concerns or opposition, then to put your hand up. But if you're in agreement with the motion as made, let's not have discussion in support. I don't expect any votes against, though, if you don't raise your hand. So please make sure your concerns or ideas are raised. Councillor Braithwaite and then Councillor Green.
Thank you. I just wanted to you mentioned something before we started this process in that that there's a chance that some of these events may not go forward based on what's happening in our community right now. And so this could be one of those, I would imagine. So is there a caveat then that or is there understanding through staff that this $500 would not go to this organization if this event was not going to go forward?
I'll put that to Mr. Payne, how this would work. With the same caveat, if the event doesn't happen, what happens if it gets postponed, say, to 2021? What happens to the grant?
Your Worship, what staff anticipate they will do is, number one, confirm with the applicants one more time that they expect to proceed with the event or purchase within 2020. If not, they will not be issued the grant. And then they will be issued the grant, and they will need to certify that if they don't proceed with it, they will return those funds to the district. So in the case where it gets postponed, to answer your question, Mr. Mayor, we would anticipate the funds to be returned and then reconsideration next year.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Payne. That's very helpful. So we have a motion on the table for $500, and I had Councillor Green next.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I wasn't going to speak against this at all. In fact, what I was going to do was explore whether or not we could increase this funding by a few $100s. And the reason I'm raising that is because since the pandemic, the whole idea of supply chains and food security has become first and foremost for all of us, and particularly for island communities. And so our agricultural ability, our ability for maintaining food security, those are being certainly stretched at this point and could become more critical in the future. So my only comment was, and to explore with my colleagues, was there an appetite, no pun intended, to increase this slightly?
Thank you, Councillor Green. I'll open that up to if anybody wishes to make a motion to increase it. You're more than welcome to, but I would always caution. They have a set event that they have fixed costs, and they're asking for the money to run their event at those costs. There's no indication that adding money from our perspective would add anything in terms of food security. They've got a fixed cost for the event, and that's where it's at. If they change, they can come back and ask us for more in that time. So it's possible though.
I realize that, but I guess I'm thinking that this has taken on much greater prominence, and even though it is an event, it brings together groups that ultimately could enhance the availability of local food and certainly look at the whole idea of supply chains. But that's, anyway, those are my feelings just off the top. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Green. And really, again, I'm going to go to Councillor Braithwaite here in just a second, but it's just, I don't want to get into a sidebar debate. If there's no motion on the table, then we're not going to sit and debate what ifs, I guess is probably what I'm asking from a time perspective. So if anybody wish to make a motion to increase it, then let's do that. And you can motivate and we'll move there, but just to keep us moving, I want to keep us to sort of keeping some procedure here. So Councillor Braithwaite, I saw you muted yourself. Is that you have anything to say? Okay. So we have a motion then. I don't see any other hands up, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? This is to approve $500 for the Capital Regional Food and Agricultural Initiatives Roundtable. All those in favor? And any opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. We have the Community Association asks for their ask. I think it was $2,000. Is there we can get a motion, I guess, and then we can get to a discussion. Councillor Green.
I'll make the motion to approve this amount.
Councillor, seconded by Councillor Zelkin. Is there any discussion on this one? Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you. I'm fully in support of giving the CAOB money again this year. I would note, though, that they've increased their ask by 1/3, and yet we're actually almost halfway through the year so far, and probably a lot of the events that they will be looking at might not be going ahead because of the COVID-19. So I would really like to support them, but I was thinking that I would think that perhaps we would support them more at like the $1,500 level rather than the $2,000 level.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. I don't want to, again, debate that point unless there's a motion made to modify it, and that is the process here for things. If you want to change the amount, to just make a motion to change the amount. Otherwise, we'll.
Okay, so then I'll make a motion to change the amounts to $1,500 from $2,000 for the CAOB.
Okay, which is there a seconder for that motion? I don't see anybody seconding the motion, so we're back to the main motion at this point of $2,000. Is there any other discussion? I'm not seeing any. We will then call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Thank you. We're on to Friends of Uplands Park ask for $2,500 for equipment.
I'll make a motion to give $2,500 to the FOUP for equipment.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Councillor Zelka.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I see later on in the list, there's also the Green Teams of Canada asking for quite a substantial increase in requested funding. And I was under the impression that some of Friends of Uplands Park work was going to be eventually be transferred over to the Green Team, but I could be incorrect here. I was wondering if there's any staff member or maybe someone from Parks, Rec, and Culture who could possibly help clarify that potential process going forward, at least in the next year.
Sure, I'll ask if there is. If not, I'm happy to step in and try and explain where what I understand things are at. Is there anybody on staff who has knowledge of the partnership between Friends of Uplands Park, the Green Team, as they do their work? I'm not seeing anybody jumping in. My understanding is certainly this year they work very closely together. So the Green Team helps gather and organize some of the school events and those things going forward. And the Friends of Uplands Park are supportive of the Green Team and the work that they do. They're a much bigger organization that does really that has staff that does more of the organizational piece of things, but they work together as a team. I think the Friends of Uplands Park, looking forward, are looking for maybe using them more and more as they do their work. But as of 2020, they're still Friends of Uplands Park are still doing all the organizing of most of the events in our parks, with the exception of the school events, which are done through the Green Team assistance. Okay, Councillor Patterson, you're still muted. Yeah, no, give it a second. There we go.
It is slow. Thank you. I just note on this application for the Friends of Upland Park, and I totally support the request. It does say that it's to purchase equipment for the stewardship program, which separates it a little bit in my mind from the Green Teams of Canada, because I know that the Friends of Uplands Park do actually use equipment in carrying out their program and getting the volunteer help. So I think that the application they put forward is warranted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other discussion here on this item? So I've got things spread all over my desk. If you see my head swiveling around a lot, that's why I'm just getting all my data. All right, then I will we'll just call the question. All those in the motion here is to approve $2,500 for the Friends of Uplands Park, just so we're all clear on what we're voting on. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Okay, thank you very much. We have an event at the Gage Gallery for $1,300. Again, I'll go back to the body here if there's for a motion of some sort, and we can debate from there. Councillor Green.
I'll move the motion to support this grant.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this? My only comment then would just be, I think it's important. We tend to do these support for these kind of events on a one-off basis, but not annually. So I think perhaps Mr. Payne, if you could if this goes through, just make the Gage Gallery aware that while we do, support this year does not indicate support or ongoing support for such events in the future. Generally, we ask that events be reasonably self-sustaining unless they're municipally, sponsored or involved in some way more formally. I guess that's the only comment I would put. Councillor Ney.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if that feedback is provided, they could also be steered to the direction of the CRD Arts Commission to make an application for one of the ideas or equity grants down there.
That's an excellent point, and they really are the body that we fund to help fund these sorts of events going forward. So thank you. Councillor Braithwaite.
And just to reiterate again, I'm sure this one will be conditional on whether or not this actually goes ahead or not.
Yeah, I'll just ask for formality to Mr. Payne to confirm, but I think that's the default yes answer. Mr. Payne?
Yes, Your Worship, that's the answer for all the applicants.
Thank you. Any other discussion? We have a motion for $1,300 for the Gage Gallery. Any discussion? Not seeing any, I will then call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. That passes. Under number 6, this is the Greater Victoria Back to Work Week Society. Their ask is for $3,000. I will just need a motion and then we can have debate. Councillor Zelka.
Well, thank you, Chair. Certainly with the pandemic, and I see that they're making some substantial changes to the Victoria Bike to Work process for this year. I don't quite understand why they would be wanting more money since most people are now working at home at this point. So I would be proposing $1,650, the same amount of money as they asked for last year, as a motion to put forward.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. I think they actually asked for $2,000 last year and were given $1,600 out of the process was how that rolled out. But so you're going to make a motion to change the amount or to make the amount, sorry, no changing. There's no motion on the floor. My apologies. Your motion is to put a motion for $1,650.
Yes, the same as last year.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that amount?
Second that.
Seconded. Okay, thank you. Any other motivation, Eric, or Councillor Zelka? Sorry, or should I just go to other speakers?
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. No, just you know, with so many people working at home at this point, and the I definitely want to support you know, the various societies and certainly the arts for the BC Restart process. But this is definitely going to be a quite some time, and certainly with potential second and third waves to the pandemic, I imagine many people will still be working at home. So I'm just not quite sure what sort of events would require a doubling of the amount of money from previous years. And so I would need someone to do some serious motivation for me to go to $3,000. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor, I have Councillor Braithwaite and then, sorry, Patterson and Ney, that's right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I was actually thinking that I wouldn't want to support this at $3,000, that I would actually support it at $2,000. So if this motion doesn't go through, then I would actually put another motion on the floor to increase that to $2,000. And in my thinking behind that is that would be a little bit up from the year prior. I think this is a great thing for us to support. I love the Bike to Work Week. I think that it's important that we support it. But when I look at their budget, I noticed that Victoria and Saanich are at the $3,000 level, and then they were asking Oak Bay to be at the $3,000 level, but others are at the $1,500 level, like Esquimalt. And I would say that we're very similar to Esquimalt in size and distance from downtown, etc. And so, to me, we should be more on the same level as that. So, if this motion doesn't go through at this level, then I would love to put something on the table at the $2,000 level, because I'd really love to support this.
Okay, thank you. I have Councillor Nathan, Councillor Patterson, and then Councillor Appleton.
Yeah, you know, I'd like to support what was originally put in. I appreciate the comparison to other communities, but in replacement of the normal activities that this organization has done in the past, they've pivoted very quickly to develop some other community events. And I notice what's going on in Victoria and all the other communities. They're having these scavenger hunts, and they are being extremely well responded to. And it's targeting a similar but expanded population in each of the districts, where they're encouraging families to go out and visit places and historical monuments and interesting places and spaces in their community on their bikes, and developing competitions, a real community builder. So the activity and the overall objective of encouraging people to get on their bikes and move around the community does look different right now. It's not going to a government office or a business office right now, but they have continued to develop activities that encourage and facilitate workers and families to use their cycles, their bikes. So I'd like to support the the full amount. I think actually what they're doing is really good and very creative, and I think serves the same objective as the other activities they've done in the past.
Thank you, Councillor Ney. I have, Councillor Patterson and Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Mayor. I think Councillor Ney has articulated very well a lot of the thoughts I had, although I support the amount put forward by Councillor Braithwaite.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just picking up, I concur 100% with what Councillor Ney has said. Just expanding on what Councillor Ney has said, I will note that she specifically referenced the scavenger hunts that have been put up by the Bike to Work Society. The scavenger hunt that was put up this week is actually for Oak Bay specifically. Oak Bay is being profiled as a community on their website actually this week and today as we speak. So on their social media outlets and on their website, their staff and folks associated with them are riding around in Oak Bay and posting videos of all the great spots in our community this week. So as Councillor Ney's pointed out, there's been a really quick response to provide different types of events. The scavenger hunts, they're doing ride the distance routes, they're doing exploratory rides. Their social media presence and their outreach has never been sort of bigger than it has been today. And I do note that in their communications to us in the appendix, they do indicate that they want to be able to host an event in the fall, and we don't know what that looks like yet, but certainly their intent is to still have a Bike to Work Week event this fall in this year. So I'm in favor of the original amount, the original ask. I think I concur with Councillor Ney that their output is very strong given the limiting circumstances, and we don't really have a situation where the active transportation, this type of thing, has never been more important than it is right now.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Appleton. Any other discussion? The motion on the floor right now is for $1,650 for the Bike to Work Week. I will just say my piece. I don't I think something in the neighborhood of this or $2,000 is probably more appropriate. And I don't think the amount here reflects the value that Bike to Work Week provides. I think it just reflects what is the reasonable share that the municipality should pay of their total bill. And if you're looking at us from a size of the municipality perspective, it seems appropriate that we'd be framed in somewhat in the same framework as our peers of equal size, and not with Victoria and Saanich, who have significantly larger budgets. But that's my own opinion on that piece. So with that, so the motion on the floor is $1,650. Sorry, Councillor Zelka, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. The website makes it clear that the Bike to Work Week event is postponed for 2020. So if this money is approved, what would it actually be for? Is it for social media? Is it for an event? Is it for purchasing some sort of a hosting thing? So how will we know if it's canceled or going forward? I'm unclear on that.
It's a fair question, given that we've been talking about getting money back if things don't happen, but I think the celebration station is one of many items here, so a little bit more difficult to adjudicate. Mr. Payne, I'm not sure if you looked at this in enough detail to answer that question, but could you give your thoughts to maybe on what might trigger a non-compliance with this donation, or is it this one that we just have to accept? It'll be used somehow, maybe not for the celebration stations.
Your Worship, the last time I checked with the representative from the Greater Victoria Bike to Work Week, it was this item had actually been scheduled for a previous council meeting. So at that time, their intentions were different, and they probably could have changed significantly since then. And they did indicate that they were looking for a fall Bike to Work Week. So if that has changed, then it's likely that to be a grant that's not approved. I would still encourage council, if they want to support this grant application as it's written, to pass a motion and such, but staff will still do the homework to ensure that we check in with organizations, and if they're not proceeding with what they submitted in their grant application, then they won't get their funds for this year. So staff won't take the liberty of telling grant applicants that they can use the funds for something else. We will say that council considered what was in the applications, and if they're not using it for what was listed in the applications, then they're not to be used.
Thank you very much for that. I think, you know, and I'll leave this to council to decide if council wishes to, let's do the financial portion of this first. If council feels that there's enough other work not specific to this in terms of the promotion piece, not to go through that detailed evaluation on any application, it's probably, then we should give that direction from council to staff through a motion. Otherwise, it'll follow the process that Mr. Payne has outlined there. So we have a motion on the table currently for $16.50 for Bike to Work Week. Any other discussion at that amount? Okay, we'll call the question then. All those in favor, I need to get clear hands. All those in favor? We have Braithwaite, Zelka, Green, and Patterson in favor, and those opposed, Councillor Nay and Appleton. Opposed. So we have 2 opposed, 4 in favor. The motion passes. Is there desire on the part of council to give direction to staff to not to allow Bike to Work Week to be to use these funds as seen as appropriate over the course of the year to promote bicycle use? And if so, I just need a motion made to that effect. Otherwise, I'll move on. So I got a motion from Councillor Nay, and was there a seconder from Councillor Braithwaite? So is that wording reasonably clear? I'm just going to go to Ms. Hopkins again, just to have it clearly on the record.
Your worship, if you could restate that for me, I would really appreciate it.
Of course, I didn't write it down, so we'll try. Just that council give direction to staff to allow the funds to be spent on any use promoting bicycle use over the course of this year, not restricted to the activities laid out in their grant application. And I'll just get you to read that back if you don't mind, just so that we have it clear. So, because in Councillor Nay, you officially made this motion. So I will just make sure that this is in alignment with what you intended for it to say, okay?
Yeah, that makes sense. And are you going to ask me to motivate, or are we just going to go through with this?
I don't know if it needs motivation. You're welcome to do so, but let me just let Ms. Hopkins just read it back so we have it as a we're very clear on what we're voting on.
A point of procedure, if I may.
Sure, Councillor Zelka.
Is it assumed that those funds would be used for activities within Oak Bay or across the CRD? I wasn't sure, or whether that needs to be part of the motion or not.
It's a fair question. I don't. If you wish to make it clear that they have to be in Oak Bay, I think that would require an amendment to this motion, because I think that by my understanding of the way they do their things, they're promoting use, and it's sometimes they promote a certain area and sometimes they don't, and sometimes they may not have an event in Oak Bay, but they might be doing some online promotional work that is hard to differentiate. So I think if you wanted to make it specific to Oak Bay, you'd have to make that clear, and then we'll get into some of the details of what that would actually look like. Ms. Hopkins, are you okay to just read the motion for clarity? Your microphone's off.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the motion is that council give direction to staff to allow the funds to be used for any activities promoting bike usage, and not just to the events included in the application as presented.
Okay, there we go. Does that meet your needs, Councillor Nay?
That's fine for me, given
Okay.
the
You're welcome to motivate if you want.
No, I'll leave it as.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wish to discuss the motion as it sits? I'm not seeing any, so we'll call the question then. All those in favor? And opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Moving on to number 8, the Heritage Foundation. Again, pretty straight. They're asking us for $5,000.
Excuse me, Mayor, I think you missed the green team, did you?
Oh, I did miss the green team. I apologize. I apologize. Sorry. Item number 7 on the agenda is green teams asking for $6,000. If you, again, I'll just go to the group here in terms of making a motion, and then we can discuss and motivate to that motion.
Are you asking for a motion, Mr. Mayor? Or
I am looking for a motion, yes.
6,000.
The motion is for the full 6,000. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councillor Patterson. Is there any discussion on that amount? Councillor Braithwaite, and then Councillor Zelka.
Thank you. I love the Green Team. I think that we should definitely support them. I do have difficulty, however, giving them more money than what we're giving the Friends of Uplands Park. This is a 63% increase over what they were asked for last year. And again, there'll be some activities that they won't be able to do this year. I understand that they work in conjunction in a lot of cases with Friends of Uplands Park. But again, I can't support this at $6,000 because I think that it's far too much of an increase over what they had last year. And again, it's more than what we give Friends of Uplands Park. So I would not be supporting this at this level, but we'll support it at another level.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. I have Councillor Zelka, then Green.
Thank you, Chair. I see that it's making specific reference to organizing five Greater Victoria Green Team activities. If, for example, in this fiscal, they were only able to get, say, 3 of those 5 done, does that mean this would be prorated? And if that was the case, I could potentially support this. Just again, one would like to know how would we evaluate this and then pay out, please.
Yeah, it's never that simple, is it? Hopefully we get back to normal years soon, not have to ask this question all the time. But actually it's a good exercise for us to sort of go through. So Mr. Payne, unfortunately I'm going to go back to you again and just ask that question where they've allocated specific events plus some more general things. How do we allocate partial or complete compliance on these items?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'll try not to speak for these organizations as best as possible. I will speak from my experience with the Green Teams throughout Greater Victoria, and they tend to say that the funding is scalable. So if they receive less funding than they've been asked for at different municipalities, they simply reduce the number of events. So I would anticipate that their answer would be similar to that. Can't guarantee it, of course, but if they're unable to do all 5 events, I imagine that they'll be able to scale the grant and return a proportionate amount.
Okay, thank you. And I will say in past years, we haven't been so prescriptive on the specifics of that. As long as they're doing events and meeting most of the requirements, they track their own time and present that the next year as part of their grant application, which they've done this year as well. So the motion on the floor right now is 6,000. If there's a motion to change that amount, this is the time to do it. If not, I will just call the question on the moved amount. Councillor Green. Oh, sorry, I had you in that list and I didn't go to you. My apologies.
No, that's okay. Thank you, Mayor. I I agree with Councillor Braithwaite. I think given the pandemic and some of the fallout and the unforeseen financial implications for Oak Bay at this point, I think we have to really focus these monies on local activities. And that's not to say that we can't support regional activity, but I would agree that I would not be comfortable giving $6,000 more than we give Uplands Park and other local groups. So I'm with Councillor Braithwaite on that one. And I'm sorry, I'm not sure what proposal she would like to make, but perhaps she has another item in mind. I'm sorry, another amount in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Patterson and then Nay, and at any time people can make motions to change, but I appreciate that we can't do everything through motion. So just general conversation here on the amount and the appropriateness is acceptable, and we can get to a motion as someone feels free at any time. So Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. My support for the amount that is shown is twofold. One is because I believe the Green Team do scalable budgets based on the number of events that they hold. So I think Mr. Payne's remarks are well founded, and I think that is what will be done. But I also really take strongly into consideration all the times that Margaret Litke, Friends of Upland Park, have presented to Oak Bay Council, giving us strong advice that that the work done by the Friends of Uplands Park has been going on for some period of time, but their resources are really pushed to the maximum. They have asked for extra support from groups like the Green Team, and they have commended the work that the Green Team does. I noticed that Friends of Uplands Park are still working on outdoor activities in the Oak Bay community and want to continue that. And I think that's important value back to the community and something that can continue going on during this pandemic time. So I think of it also as a very positive initiative to keep going throughout this. That's my reason for supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Nay, and then Councillor Braithwaite.
Just very briefly, I concur with Councillor Patterson, and I guess just what I've seen, for me, yes, we are in a pandemic, and yes, there is a lot of austerity, but I don't think this is the place we pull back at this moment in time, because this is extremely good work done by volunteers, gets people out, contributes to community resilience, and is consistent with the values and the objectives that we've already defined about looking after our green spaces. And the work that they do is extremely good value for money. And I agree with Councillor Patterson. I think we have to get our heads around that, we're using, these are volunteers, you get good value for money, and we are maybe not going to be able to keep relying fully on volunteers. And this is an important transition. My talk with the members of this green team, they could do tenfold the work that they are actually doing. And this is a very small portion of the work that could be done to address green initiatives in the community. So I support the full amount as per the motion on the table.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Nay. Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you. And I agree with everything that Councillor Nay and Councillor Patterson are saying. It's a very wonderful organization. I will disagree, though, in that they're all volunteers, because in actual fact, there is a paid component, I believe, for the Green Team. Correct me if I'm wrong there. But I believe there is a paid portion in there. I honestly still think that supporting them at the $6,000 level is a little bit too rich for us. I think that we should go back to the level that we supported them last year, which is the $3,790. And if it's appropriate, I would like to put that motion on the table at this time. So is that an appropriate?
Can we use a slightly rounder number than 3,790?
Okay. So I will say that I would like to put a motion on the table that we support the Green Team of Canada at $3,800 for the year 2020 application grant in aid application.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. So this is a motion to amend the amount from $6,000 to $3,800. So that's now the motion on the floor, but the general discussion stays the same. I mean, people really at the end of the day, if you're not comfortable with that number, we'll vote against it. And if you're comfortable, you'll vote for it. But if you want to discuss, I think Councillor Patterson and Nay have made a case for the higher amount. We're just looking really here at whether or not this is an appropriate change. Councillor Green?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I totally agree with the comments made both by Councillor Patterson and Councillor Nay. But I also obviously agree with Councillor Braithwaite and the concern around ensuring that we're even-handed as much as we can possibly be, and that we take into consideration where we may or may not be financially in the future. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So we actually, I guess procedurally here, Ms. Hopkins, I just want to make sure we have a motion to amend. So this is really, we're still on the motion to amend. Well, it'll essentially, I'll just have to call the question twice, essentially. It'll be once to amend and then once to deal with whatever the outcome of that is. Okay. Just making sure I got my procedures right here. Is there any other discussion on this? And again, if you're supportive, vote in favor of the change. Otherwise, it defaults back to the $6,000 of the original motion. And then we'll call a question on that. And there'll be another opportunity to amend at that point if anybody wishes. Any discussion on the motion to amend the amount? Okay, all those in favor. This is the motion to amend from $6,000 to $3,800. All those in favor? And opposed? Oh man, this has come down to me then, has it? I wasn't, I don't want to be put in this position. I will support that motion. I think that I appreciate all the work they do. So the motion passes to amend. So we're at $3,800. And so here we are. The motion is now back on the table again at $3,800. People are welcome to amend it again if they see fit. Otherwise, I will call the question on the amended amount of $3,800. I'm not seeing any hands. Also, just people can comment at this point before I call the question on the motion. I'm not seeing any. I will call the question. This is the to approve $3,800 for the green teams. All those in favor? All those opposed? None opposed. Thank you. Councilor Nate, do you want to vote in opposition to that?
Yeah, I vote opposite.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. The Heritage Foundation is up next. We have $5,000 for that. They're asked for. The last year they got somewhere shy of just under 4,000, I believe. But this is a pretty regular amount asked for to provide the funds for the grants from the Heritage grants. Is there a motion that someone wishes to make? Councillor Patterson?
I will move that the grant and aid for the Heritage Foundation be at the 5,000 amount as shown.
I'll second that.
Okay, so it's moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on that amount? I'm not seeing any. I will just make the comment. I think it's inappropriate to have that as our standard amount. We have reduced it in previous years, largely because they haven't been spending the grants. But there's been quite a few grants applications that have come through in the last couple of years, and so the reserves for that fund is starting to come down, and so I think it's appropriate to fund it at the full amount again. Councillor Patterson, did you have anything else to add?
Yes, thank you for those comments, Mayor. And I should add that even during this time, the foundation continues to meet, and as I had said in an earlier council meeting, they continue to meet and continue to vet the grant applications and ensure that the funding goes out during this season. I should also add that the Heritage Foundation is spending a little more money this year getting the website that they have really up to speed, and they're getting more activity on that too. So in this new world of operating that we find ourselves, we are managing quite nicely to continue with the work of the foundation in Oak Bay.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Patterson. Any other discussion before I call the question? The motion is $5,000 for the Heritage Foundation. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And any opposed? Okay, none opposed. Thank you very much. We have the Oak Bay Lawn Bowling Club, and I think this is probably going to need a little bit more explanation or questions, but we have an asset for $14,600 for some capital improvements. I just need a motion from the table, or we can have a discussion first if people see fit. There may be some questions of staff or to ask. Councillor Braithwaite.
If it's all right, could we have a discussion? Because I did actually ask Mr. Payne very late in the day today if he could perhaps get some information for us in regards to what our agreement is or what our lease is with the Oak Bay Lawn Bowling Club, because I thought that might give us a little bit more insight as to what the expectation is from the municipality side in funding something like this. So I'm not sure, Mr. Payne, I've kind of put you on the spot, I'm sorry. If you were able to find out any information in regards to what our agreement or lease is.
Mr. Payne?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And incidentally, I was able to respond while the meeting was underway. So my response was that I believe your question, Councillor Braithwaite, was specific to about who maintains the premises, and the lease requires that the club maintain the premises in good repair and at its expense.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Payne. I guess, can I ask a follow-up question to that, Mr. Payne? Because I'm not familiar with the wording of that lease. Sometimes they indicate that major repairs like roof replacement, things of that nature would be covered by the owner. So do you know where the dividing line is on this lease, if any, in terms of maintenance or replacement?
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't believe that the lease specifically addresses that, but typically capital improvements are the responsibility of the owner, and it's debatable, but I think this would be considered capital improvements. It's not that the windows themselves are ineffective; it's that they're being replaced with a more effective model.
Okay, thank you. So, and I really appreciate you asking that question, Councillor Braithwaite, because this one caught my eye as well. I'm like, where does this fit into? Why a grant as opposed to us maintaining a building of our own? It's either our responsibility or it's not. It shouldn't be coming down to grants. So, I was a little. We had this asked last the year before as well for some work, and it's sort of similar. At that time, it didn't fund the full amount. So.
Your Worship, may I just contribute a bit more information?
Please do, yes.
Thank you. The club is also not permitted, according to the lease, to erect or construct any building or structure or make any alterations to the building, basically without the owner's approval. So they would still need that approval in order to proceed, notwithstanding the grant amount. And also the tenant, I'll call the club the tenant, they're responsible to pay for utilities as well, and this would certainly improve the amount of utilities that they would pay. So that's part of the motive, I suspect, for replacing the windows, is that it would reduce their operating costs.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, sorry, just going back to look at the grant application. So the $3,280 given last year went towards replacing other windows in the main clubhouse at that time. So again, I think they had a similar ask last time, and a lesser amount was given towards that piece. So it's interesting. So okay, and this is one of the more unusual grant applications. Councillor Braithwaite, then Appleton.
Thanks. And just perhaps staff could help me with this as well. I know that this application is asking for specifics as far as lighting, et cetera, goes, because they're looking to put in more up-to-date lighting that will be more cost-effective. And my question, I guess, would be to staff is there a way that we could help with we probably get a better pricing on lighting within the municipality, especially the type of lighting that they're looking for here. Is that something that we could help get a better price on for this, or would that be out of scope for us?
Mr. Payne?
Your Worship, I'm sure that our suppliers would be willing to extend rates that they provide to us to them as well.
Thank you. Councillor Appleton?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just, Councillor Braithwaite clarified the fact that what was actually being asked for is as per attachment 1 in their submission, which is the lighting improvements. Yeah, I have an issue with a grant being applied to this particular project. Essentially, it does appear in my mind to be a capital improvement. As far as I can tell, the capital improvements and the upgrades that are presented here are intended to increase the functionality and the usability of the space. It also includes a fairly significant amount to replace refrigerators and freezers, which I'm going to assume support the usage by the membership and for special events, because I know special events are held there. I'm wondering, given the kind of year that we're in and the potential usage of this facility this year, I have some problems with the amount being asked for here for capital works, especially in a year where I think it would not be overreaching to say that there is going to be a significantly reduced usage of the facility. So I think that there's some big questions in my mind about that.
Okay. If there's no other general comments or questions, then we can get to a motion here. We need to have something to talk to simplify our debate. So is there someone willing to make a motion for us to talk to? Councillor Appleton, thank you.
In as much as I don't like to do it, just given my misgivings about the capital nature of the project, I would recommend that the Oak Bay Lawn Bowling Club receive a grant of $0 for this year for this project.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there a seconder for that amount? Councillor Green, was that a second?
I'll second it for discussion.
Okay. Well, it's pretty straightforward. It's a pretty round number. So are people comfortable about having no contribution to their ask, or if so, then we'll support this. Councillor Braithwaite?
I understand where Councillor Appleton is coming from. I think that this is something that we have as a council supported in the past. I would like to see us support at the tune of about $5,000 perhaps. I think that would get them on their way to getting the funds for that they're going to need for these improvements. So I would really like to support them at about $5,000, and then again have our staff in discussion with them to try and get some good pricing on the lights, etc., that they're looking at. So if this motion that's on the floor fails, then that will be the motion that I'll put forward.
Okay. Excuse me. Thank you very much.
I guess I'll just speak to the motion on the floor. Is that I'm supportive of a more incremental kind of funding for what they're asking for, but a zero kind of number. I think that I actually, you know, so a lot of the work they could get done now because there isn't a lot of activity. So I think, you know, a reduced sum, as Councillor Braithwaite speaking to, is supported. So I'm not going to support this motion.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, I will just add my 2 cents. I think I would not support the full amount, but I think there is some reasonableness to paying at least a portion of, maybe not the fridge and freezers, but at least a portion of the lighting and pieces as part of this. But so I can't support the zero, but I am looking forward to another motion being made if this one does fail. Any other discussion? I'll call the questions. This is, again, the motion is essentially to decline the grant application for Oak Bay Lawn Bowling Club. All those in favor? Councillor Appleton in favor, and all those opposed. All other members opposed. So there we go. And so we're back to ground zero here. No pun intended. Is there another amount that someone's willing to propose? Councillor Ney, you see your hand.
Well, I'll do what Councillor Braithwaite. I'll throw 5,000 into the pot here.
A second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on that amount? Not seeing any. I will. Oh, Councillor Appleton, go ahead.
And just picking up on something that we just talked about, I know that their cost of lighting installation in their appendix is listed as $6,000. So I guess I would be hopeful, based on what Mr. Payne has said, that if a $5,000 grant was approved, that they could complete their, they're quoting prices at a sort of a retail price. So hopeful that $5,000 would achieve what they want to do for lighting installation if they get it at a lower price.
Thank you. I think just for the record there, I think that's the installation cost. The $6,000 is the cost for someone to come in and actually do the work, and the balance of that $14,000 was for the hardware itself. That's how it totals up. It took me a while to figure out the way that added up, so we're not funding the entire amount no matter what with this piece, but the $5,000 is a round number, at least for clarity. Is there any other discussion on the $5,000? So the motion on the floor right now is $5,000 for Oak Bay Lawn Bowling Club. I'm not seeing any other discussion. I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Okay, thank you. And number 10 on the list here, almost there. St. John's Society asked us $3,000. I'll put this to the group. We did have one ask of them in the past for, I think it was $500 that we granted for some equipment that they were looking for. That was a different, maybe somebody else has a better memory than me. I'm not sure if it was the St. John's Society or St. John's Ambulance, how they applied for it that time. But they're certainly a fixture at many of our events in this community. But they've never asked us for this level of funding before. So I'll put that's sort of my brief summary of where this application is. Is there any discussion or anybody wants to make a motion on this? Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you. I think it actually was, if my memory is correct, it was the St. John's ambulance that came to us for a piece of equipment in the past. This to me, I mean, they have such great funding from all over. I would be comfortable, I think, at the $1,500 level for this. So I'll put a motion on the table to fund St. John's Society at $1,500.
1,500. Okay, so that's a motion. Is there a seconder for that motion?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Okay, thank you. Any other discussion on this? And again, I would ask those people have concerns about that number to speak up, not just to speak in favor of it, and we can address those concerns. Councillor Green.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't disagree that they receive funding from other levels, but at this time, given the role that healthcare workers and and first responders have played in this whole health crisis that we're experiencing now, I would rather support them at the $3,000 level. Not only because they deserve it, but as an affirmation on behalf of the community that they are doing incredibly important work for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Any other discussion? Okay, that's fine. Councillor, sorry. Oh, no, I thought I heard Councillor Braithwaite. Just the light went on, not your hand. With that then, the motion on the floor is for $1,500 for St. John's Society. And with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Green, opposed. Thank you, that passes. So $1,500. We're down to the Vancouver Island Film Commission, $10,000. This is a grant we've given pretty consistently over the years with some variation at times. But I'll give it to council as to make a motion and we can talk to that motion.
I'll make the motion to fund the Vancouver Island South Film and Media Commission for $10,000.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion, any concerns that people want to change that amount? Okay, then I will then call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed. Thank you. And we are at the Victoria Sexual Assault Center, asking for $6,000. I probably just, for the interest of those people who are newer to council, this is one that we had came to us, extraordinarily worthy organization. However, it was funded by us, I think 2 years ago, with the understanding that we also wrote a letter to the province asking for them to fund it. The province has funded it for 2019, 2020, or maybe 2020, 2021, but given no long-term financial support commitments for this organization. It is a very valuable piece. I think there was pretty good arguments made that it didn't fit within our mandate of municipal government, and probably not ideal to have it sitting here in our grants in perpetuity. So we were looking for them to have other sources of funding. So that's the kind of the context for this. It's not out of the blue, but there was notice given at that time that we would not continue funding it in future, but we would fight for them to get funding from other sources of government where it belonged. So I'm just giving that context. It does not mean we should not fund it this year. I just want you to have that history with it as well. So with that, I'll hand it over to council. Councillor Green, go ahead.
Thank you for the context. I will move that we support them at the amount that was given last year. That was $5,580, I think. I can't, sorry, it's very small print. I'm sitting in a dark room, but at whatever the 2019 level was. And just quickly to motivate oh, sorry, I'll wait until someone seconds.
Yes, go ahead, councillors. It's seconded by Councillor Zelka, so go ahead, Councillor Green.
Oh, thank you very much. Again, if we have been following a number of reports and studies and real concerns around the mental health impacts of the pandemic, violence against women and sexual assault those rates are not only of great concern, but apparently have increased across the country because of isolation and because of lockdown issues. So I feel more than ever before this organization needs support as well. I would like us to advocate again with the province to provide continuous stable funding. But in lieu of that, at the moment, I feel compelled that we should, that all councils across the region should try and support this group.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Any other
Sorry,
discussion on
it was
this?
Councillor Green. It was Councillor
Sorry,
Green.
Councillor Green. Sorry.
That's okay.
My
Unless
eyes are
voice is
panning away,
changed.
and no, I knew who you were. I just was looking
Okay.
across, and I think it was the last name that flashed in my corner of my eyes. I was looking to my screen, so my apologies. I know who you are. Sorry. Is there any other? So the motion right now is and seconded is the same amount last year, which is $5,580. Any other discussion on that amount? Yeah, Councillor Patterson and Councillor Appleton.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I certainly will support this. I do it with some apprehension because I really feel that this whole area is something that the province really needs to strongly get behind. And so I think we need to be very firm in continuing to advocate for this group who it is getting more difficult for them to operate continuously because they don't have a continuous sort of funding, and this having to go forward every year and ask communities. My understanding also is that there will be reductions in the amount from other districts of the CRD because the province has not stepped up to the plate. And so while I would originally perhaps have felt along those lines also that the future funding from Oak Bay needed to be withdrawn from our grant aids, and in fact, we became strong advocates with the province. However, I know that the group this year in particular, the number of calls is up. And I also know that last year, the Assault Center actually had to disconnect the emergency line for a while because they didn't have the funding to operate it. So particularly in this difficult time, and knowing that calls come from members of the District of Oak Bay as well as other areas in the CRD, I would recommend supporting the amount as put forward by Councillor Green.
Okay. Again, I'll go to people who wish to speak against that amount, just so that we're not spending time reiterating arguments or arguing for something that has support. So is there anybody who has concerns about that amount and might be considering a proposal of different? Oh, sorry, Councillor Appleton, I had you on my list and I've just lost track. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. And yeah, it's relative to exactly what you just said. I concur with everything that's been said about the significant value of this organization. I would like to propose an amendment that it be funded at the full amount at $6,000.
Okay, there's a difference of $150 is moved and seconded by Councillor Green, I think. Is that a seconding hand, Councillor Green?
Absolutely, yes. Thank you, Councillor Appleton.
Okay, so there's a motion, amendment motion to amend the amount from $5,850 to $6,000. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Sorry, just for clarity, Your Worship, I believe that Councillor Green was referring to the last granted amount, which was $5,000.
Oh, sorry, 5,580. Yes, sorry. I had them. Yeah.
So I understand not an enormous change, but still a significant percentage change. And I think that there's also a demonstration of our support for the work of this organization by funding them for their full amount.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. So moved and seconded. Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Yes, just quickly, and thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to clarify in my earlier remarks, I referred only to women, but in fact, this affects men and women, boys and girls, and families. So I just wanted to make that clear that this has a wide-ranging impact. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And back to this table. So the motion on the floor is an amendment motion to amend it from 5,580, sorry for my mistake, up to 6,000. Councillor Ney?
Yeah, I'm going to speak in favor or in opposition to the motion on the table, only because, not because of the good work, not because of the need, not because, particularly at this time, but because I think we have to send a message here that this is not sustainable. And I think the reduction back to last year's amount could do that. I'd like to continue to advocate, but to send the message that this municipal funding is not the source that they can continue to rely on. The very good work that they do for people in our community notwithstanding. So I'm going to vote against the motion that's currently on the table.
Okay, thank you. Any other, Councillor Braithwaite?
Yeah, I would, in total agreement with Councillor Ney. I think that we do need to send that message, so I'll be voting against it as well.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. I should speak up because I always ask people to if they're going to vote against something. I'll for the same reasons, essentially, won't support the motion to change it. I think by changing it, it kind of sends a message that we are, sort of adapting our funding to the times, and that sort of gives an indication of trend. And I think this is really serious. It needs to be funded. It does incredible value of work. It's cost effective. It helps everybody. There's no doubt about that. I think the question here is municipal grants, which are designed for community, events and services, the appropriate place to be funding regional healthcare services. And I think it's just not, and we've generally had agreement on that. So I think you're right. This is sort of we give a very subtle message by how we fund this. So I'm not going to support the increase, but I would support the original amount proposed. So Councillor Green.
Yes, thank you. And I understand the rationale about supporting the previous amount, and that was my first motion, and that was to test the waters, hoping for the amount that was being requested this year. But let me just point out that while it is important to send a message to the province, the cost of sending that message is directly impacting the actual organization. And so I don't see funding at 6,000 and sending a message at the same time to be mutually exclusive. And I guess that's my feeling, that when this happens, when there's a jurisdictional issue, in fact, organizations like this one get caught in the middle. And so that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. So the motion on the table right now is to amend the motion amount from the 5,500 approximately to 6,000. If there's no more discussion, I'll call the questions. This is an amendment motion to amend the amount. All those in favor? And all those opposed? Councillor Ney, Patterson, Zelka, and Braithwaite, and Murdoch. I don't matter. So the motion to change it fails. So we are at the original amount of $5,580. Is there any further debate? I didn't hear much in the way of voices saying to reduce it. So I assume here that we're probably pretty good with the amount originally proposed by Councillor Green. But if there is any changes people want to make, this is the time to say it. Not seeing any hands, so I will call the question then. So this is to approve $5,580 for Victoria Sexual Assault Center. And may I just ask then that, could we also actually I'll call the question. All those in favor? And any opposed? Councillor Green opposed. Thank you. Can I also maybe appropriate at this point just to direct the mayor to write a letter to the province, again, requesting stable and consistent funding for this organization? Councillor Green, is there a seconder? Yes, moved and seconded. Okay, is there, I don't think it needs much discussion, but I'll happy to take any if you have any. Councillor Green?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And just to make the letter strong, it doesn't have to be so polite. It can be strong and forceful in its own way. So that's what I would encourage. And thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem. I'll swear profusely in my letter. Don't worry. I will say, so we have that motion on the table. No other comments. All those in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Thank you very much. We are at the last one of these things, Victoria Women's Transition House. The request is $2,500. I'll turn it to the council for a motion and discussion. Councillor Green.
I'll make the motion to support the Victoria Women's Transition House at to the tune of $2,500. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And seconded by Councillor Zelka. I'm going to again ask the question if people have an objection to that amount to raise it here. And something, it's sort of similar in the past. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Yeah, I mean, this is really so similar to the previous application. Again, it's regional. It should be covered in that respect. So I would like to see it go to what we gave them last year. I mean, it's a very worthy organization for sure. And again, I know the arguments are going to come out very similar to the application previous to this one. But I would actually like to make a motion to fund it at the amount that we funded last year, which is $1,220.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Is there a seconder for that motion?
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Councillor Braithwaite, I think I agree the arguments are sort of similar to the last one, but if there's anything else you wish to add on this one, you're welcome to do so.
I think the only thing I would say is that is actually 100% increase over what we funded them, like over 100% increase over what we funded them last year. And though the need is great, I do think that we should do something very similar to what we did with the Victoria Sexual Assault Center, in that we should write a letter also that to the government to include a Victoria Women's Transition House in kind of the same vein as what you would have for Victoria Sexual Assault Center.
Fair enough. I think we have to be a bit careful in this one, just on the sense we can maybe do that as a separate motion, and I'll talk to that piece because it's a different, slightly different organizational structure than the Women's Sexual Assault Center. Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Yes, I'm just going to make generic comments, and you're correct. My comments aren't very different from what I said before, but I guess I'm trying to make the point that when we reduce the funding as suggested, it doesn't hurt us, it hurts them. I still believe that we can make our case to the province without having to directly impact operationally either of the organizations. And I guess that's my argument, that at the end of the day, it is the front line that gets damaged, regardless of our message. And I don't see how that, I don't see how that's really helpful in the end, but that's me and that's how I feel about it. But I understand and respect my colleagues' feelings about it as well. But I think there's another way to do the message without impacting the organization so directly. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Green. I'm just going to go to any first-time speakers at this point. The motion is on the floor. I'll come back to you, Councillor Braithwaite. Nobody else? Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Just to say that, there are grant and aid, our grants and aid are put in place for something that's a little bit different than what the last two applications have been, I think. And I think that's what we should really keep in mind is what the purpose of our grants and aid are. And I think that maybe would give us a clearer look at what we should be funding and what we shouldn't be, and what would fall in our purview and what doesn't.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Councillor Ney?
I guess, is the motion on the table right now for the 2,500 or the last year's one? Sorry.
The motion is for the 1,250.
Yeah, okay.
For last year.
I'm going to vote in support of this, but really, I mean, I think there's two ways to approach this. I do appreciate this, but I am concerned that next year we're going to get a creep effect. So then next year the amount goes up again. And I really appreciate what Councillor Green is saying, that it does impact the frontline, the ability to do the frontline work. But if we continue to facilitate like this, then we kind of enable the reaching out for monies at a municipal level when, as has already been said, it really needs to come from the province. It's a provincial program, and I agree with Councillor Braithwaite. We talk about the letter writing, but I am concerned about the yearly creep of asking for increased funds each year if we continue this path.
Okay, thank you. I'll get to you in a second, Councillor Green. Ms. Hopkins, just for my own memory here, now I'm getting myself confused. Was there a motion made for the original amount? This is a motion to amend that to the fixed amount. Is that correct on this one? Okay. So yeah, so we had the motion is technically a motion to amend the original 2,500 motion to the last year's amount, which was 1,000. Sorry, I have it here, $1,220. Councillor Green, you wanted one more kick at the can here?
No, it was just a question, actually. Can we, for the public's information, can we re-articulate or re-clarify what these grants and aids are for? Grants and aid are for. I have to admit that I know that both of these programs do impact and support local residents, but I just want to be, are they out of line for the kind of work that we do with grants and aid? It's a question.
It's a really good question, and in truth, we really should be including in this. There is a policy document that was developed by council and adopted that kind of laid out, not constraining. At the end of the day, every council has its ability, but it provided some guidelines as to where the intention was, where the priority should be, and it really resided around one-off events, so basically not funding operational costs, and focusing on local events that support local initiatives. So not regional in nature. Those are, if I had to boil it down to 2 points, those are probably it. And so it's never that clear, obviously. I mean, you could argue that some of the funding for KOB, as an example, is quite operational. Frankly, it doesn't necessarily all, but the majority of it's going towards events and things in the community. So it's not prescriptive, but that's how it boils down. It does make it pretty clear that these sorts of asks for healthcare, for funding of other levels of government, should not be funded through grant applications. So that's the hesitation that's occurred here. And next year, we take a note that we will include that document with this package, so that we can all kind of refresh ourselves on what came out. Again, it is not prescriptive. We can make any decision we want at this table.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Green. So the motion is to change this to $1,220. Not seeing any other comment. I will just speak in favor of this motion. I think for many of the same reasons as were before. This is important for us not to get too far down the track. We have a very limited grant monies, and it doesn't take very much for this to eat up a significant portion of that overall piece. This is also a pretty substantial portion of their overall budget, as they shared with us in terms of their costing. So with that, we have a motion to adjust the number to 1220. So this is a motion to amend to 1220. Any other discussion before I call the question? Seeing none, all those in favor? And this is to amend it to 1220. And any opposed to the amendment? 2, we have Councillor Zelka and Councillor Appleton opposed. So that passes. So we're now back to the main motion, which is now to approve the funding of Victoria Women's Transition House in the amount of $1,220. Make sure I've got that number right. Yes. Is there any other discussion on this? Not seeing any, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Any opposed? Councillor Green opposed. Thank you. So that gets us through that, except we still have to deal with the grant and aid request from the Francophonie Games. Can I ask Mr. Payne, if you've been doing a running total, and do we have an assessment of where our gap is between our the budgeted amount and the amount assigned so far to the grant and aid?
Yes, Your Worship. There's approximately $36,950 remaining in the grant and aid discretionary budget.
Okay, so I'm going to throw this out there because we have to have a motion as to how we're going to word the grant and aid for Francophonie Games. And I might propose, given we have that buffer, that maybe we approve the full amount this year, but it's subject to them actually putting the event on. So this is the event funding, not any kind of planning funding. Is that that'd be my suggestion, just given that we've given ourselves enough room this year, and that frees us up from having to accommodate this money next year. But that's just a suggestion. I'll leave it to council as to where they would like to kind of make a motion there's a number of suggestions in the report, including doing 15 this year and 15 next. Councillor Appleton?
I would like to make a motion, Your Worship, that we proceed with option 3 in the staff report to fund $15,000 for the Francophonie Games, to approve the $30,000 grant request, funding $15,000 from 2020 discretionary grant and aid budget and $15,000 from the 2021 discretionary grant and aid budget.
Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder for that?
Second.
Moved and
Second.
seconded. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton, if you want to say anything. I think go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I appreciate your comments as a preamble. I guess I take a slightly different view. I do definitely agree with the idea that funding for the Francophonie Games should be contingent on confirmation, of course, that the event should be going ahead. I actually take the view that it would be of benefit to the district to retain more funds in the 2020 discretionary grant budget. What the process that we've just completed allows us an additional funds beyond what we were at, about 5,000, and now have extra. I think in a year where the balance of the year is highly unpredictable in terms of how we might support our community, I would love to see us retain a bit more discretionary funding in that fund, so that if community groups or community organizations approach us at the back half of this year, crossing our fingers that we have the ability to restart operations, and if those grants could be used in some way to help stimulate community activities or help support community initiatives that are helping get us back after the COVID, during the COVID recovery. Of course, we have no sense exactly of what that looks like. I would have greater confidence in having a little bit more discretionary funds available to community groups to be able to support them.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Appleton, and well motivated. Is there any other discussion that the council has? Councillor Green, you had your hand up as seconder. Do you want to speak to it? Are you comfortable? Okay, any other debate, discussion? I'm not seeing any. All right, then I will call the question. All those in favor? And any opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Thank you for making a motion that was so easily acceptable there, Councillor Appleton. As we move on in our agenda, item number 6, which is the use of public space to support small business. I'll turn this over to Mr. Haran, I'm assuming, just to give a quick overview, but I think it's pretty straightforward.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. We're just pleased to be able to come to Council to seek direction on temporarily relaxing some of the restrictions in the streets and traffic bylaw to enable staff to support potential use of public spaces for small businesses such as cafes and restaurants. And the mechanism that we'll use to do that is the street occupancy permit for temporary sidewalks and parking stall patios on a case-by-case basis. So, so the direction is, the request is for Council to give us that direction and to also waive application fees and administration fees that are normally applied for these purposes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haran. Any questions of Council? Councillor Green?
I'm sorry, no question. I was going to make the motion, actually.
Okay, go ahead and make the motion. It's always
Okay,
acceptable.
I'm going to make the motion based on the staff recommendations that we support this initiative. I think it's a really good one.
Moved and seconded and thirded. Okay, perfect. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Zelka, and then Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is a good alignment with, I think, some provincial initiatives to try and relax some of the permits around food and alcohol in the public space. And I see that this being in good alignment with that. I just wanted to confirm that with respect to what we're delegating to our Director of Engineering and Public Works, is that there's no difference in a permit whether it's for food or for alcohol. If there's a request for the public space to be used outside of the establishment, that we are delegating. I didn't know whether there's a difference between alcohol and food permits. That's what I guess the essence of what I'm asking. And if there is, I want to make sure that's both included in here.
No, thank you very much, Councillor Zelka. I know the answer, but I'll ask the question of staff. What is the status if someone has a liquor license and the use of that license on patio space that's approved? Oh, sorry, maybe I'll go to Mr. Anderson for clarification on how the rules apply.
Yes, Your Worship, thank you. Everybody hear me all right?
We do, thank you.
Excellent, okay. So yes, the province has introduced an expedited process around existing liquor license establishments and the allowance for them to expand into, as Mr. Haran mentioned, potential patio spaces. So whether they're a food primary or a liquor primary, they're going to be afforded that opportunity to expand into those patio areas. So there's really no distinction.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any. Oh, Councillor Braithwaite. Sorry, I had you on my list again.
That's okay. Thank you, Chair. And I'm so pleased to see this come forward. I think it's great that we're supporting our small businesses this way. I think that we're going to be coming to interesting times. So anything that we can do to be able to show our support to these businesses along, not only along the avenue, but Estevan, Foul Bay, all of those different places. I hope that a lot of businesses will see this and come forward and try and utilize this. I also hope that, I know that there's been talk about trying to do something with markets that will help promote people to come to the village and shop in our, not only in the market, but also in our businesses as well. So hopefully we'll be able to do something to that as well. But totally support this. I'm looking forward to seeing what businesses, what ideas businesses bring forward to us, and how staff is going to be able to help them with these innovative solutions for the small businesses. So thank you.
Great. I'm just going to say if Councillor Nay has to leave, so I was going to say shortly, I think she's actually leaving now. So we will, I was just trying to wrap this up before she left, but it's okay. We have the balance of the council here. So Councillor, sorry, Ms. Varela, did you wish to speak to something? No. Sorry, Councillor Green, go ahead. And then
Oh,
Councillor
thank you,
Zelka.
Mayor. Thank you very much, and I appreciate Councillor Braithwaite's comments very much. As the BIA liaison, anything we can do, as she says, to support our small businesses, not only within the BIA radius, but also in the 4 village centers across the municipality, anything we can do is helpful. I also appreciate that Councillor Appleton and I have already met with the BIA, trying to look at the present and the future. And we hope for further discussions with Councillor Braithwaite, myself, and Councillor Appleton, representing tourism and the BIA concerns and small business concerns. But this is a great initiative, and I'm grateful to staff for bringing it forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just, being mindful of time here, I don't want to spend lots of time all agreeing if we're going to vote on something, but you're all welcome to speak to it. So go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question relating to the date, November 15, 2020. Is this aligning with some sort of a provincial date that's been supplied, or is this originating from Oak Bay? Because I would imagine maybe the end of the year might be a more appropriate date.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. I'm not sure if I should go to Mr. Anderson, Mr. Haran, or Mr. Haran and Mr. Anderson have both unmuted their phones, or their microphone. So
go ahead, Mr. Haran, if you're.
Yeah, I can try. I'll jump in. So the selection of the date is tied into the provincial guidelines that were just released. Have end of October as the end date for their liquor and food restrictions. So from our perspective, we knew that this had to be a temporary measure, and the idea was to have to go beyond that date, but and allow the businesses that have done some kind of temporary construction enough time to tear it down and get ready for winter. So it was giving a few weeks notice at the end of that process. That's the rationale behind that choice.
Thank you very much for the answer, and thank you for the question. I thought it was because it was my birthday. I thought that was the date that we set there. Sorry, I don't have any other questions. I don't see any other hands. Anybody else wish to speak to the motion at this point? So I'll then call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. And I do just, Ms. Hopkins, if I just note, Councillor Nay had to leave the meeting at 2:42. And number 7 is suspension of committee and commission meetings. Here we have the report in hand. Is there, Ms. Hopkins, do you wish to speak to this item?
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is just a request coming back to council, as we had indicated previously that we would again bring this to council depending on what the circumstances we found ourselves in were. And given that the provincial state of emergency has extended, we have come back to council asking that we continue to suspend these committee and commission meetings until the district's emergency operations center is deactivated.
Thank you, Ms. Hopkins. There's no motion on the table. Is there, if perhaps we can have a motion and then we can speak to that motion, might be the simplest. Councillor Braithwaite.
I'll move that staff be directed to temporarily suspend all committee and commission meetings until the district's emergency operations center is deactivated.
Okay, it's moved. Is there a seconder? Moved and seconded. Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
I just have a question. Does this include tourism and the BIA as they don't have staff support?
I'll give that to Ms. Hopkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. The BIA is not a body, an advisory body of council. It's a standalone. So if they wish to continue their meetings and they have a way of doing so, we wouldn't be able to have any say in that. And from what I understand, tourism, of course, tourism is also slightly different from our regular advisory bodies in that we're really a flow through for their funding.
Right.
So they have been able to continue their meetings, again, not needing municipal space or staff support. It's really the committees and commissions that need a physical location, staff reports and staff support and application, possibly applicant attendees, that we're really coming to council with this ask for at this time.
And if I just may have a follow-up, Mayor, I know that the PAAC has had a meeting and they do require staff support. So I'm wondering where the Arts Committee falls.
Ms. Hopkins.
Thank you for that. From my understanding, all of our advisory bodies are currently stood down with the direction from council. So that's something that staff would have to follow up with.
Thank you, Ms. Hopkins. I'm going to go to the Councillor Green next, but can I just ask just for a clarification? That's an interesting question on the divide, but my understanding of that divide was some of our committees and commissions, being committees of council, are required to abide by the Local Government Act in the community charter, which outlays the fact that we have to be public meetings, they have to have minutes taken, they have to be open, to the public. Is that the dividing line? Those ones that fit that criteria are being essentially stood down temporarily, and ones that don't require that, either the committees, commissions, or the subcommittees that do require are being allowed to go forward? So I'm sorry, I'm asking for that clarification from staff here. Ms. Varela?
Your Worship, there might have been something lost in the translation between the Arts Committee being associated with the Parks and Rec Commission, but certainly as it stands, and there might be a lapse in their terms of reference, but it was staff's understanding that all advisory body meetings who are a standing or select committee or commission of council should not be meeting because they should be advertised meetings, they should have minutes. So if there was an oversight, staff will follow up and clarify that protocol. But really, your advisory bodies are an extension of council meetings, and it should be council directing when those meetings occur again. So staff will reach out to assist as necessary to straighten that out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Councillor Green, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and I appreciate the comments that everyone has made so far. Just a couple of questions. One is, I think everyone received a copy of Mr. Michael Prince's letter concerning applications, building and construction in the Heritage Conservation Area. And with the lack of the Heritage Commission being involved, he was concerned about the future of or impacts on that area. The other question is there and I guess not because we haven't been told, but is there an end date in anyone's mind about when these meetings could begin to reoccur? I know a number of volunteers are asking. And just for your information, the tourism committee continues to meet via Zoom. So they're doing it in a safe way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. I think Mr. Anderson would probably be the best person to answer the question about the impact on land use applications going forward.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, members of council. We may recall that April 23rd, staff brought a report to council that spoke to how during this pandemic we would be addressing or dealing with processes for our applications. Particularly, if I can speak to the heritage conservation area that would require, typically would require a permit process referred to as a heritage alteration permit process. In that report we provided to council, we indicated that we would receive the applications and conduct our full staff review and prepare reports. And then the indication in the report was that those applications would be on hold until our commissions were put in place. I will remind that there was some discussion and consideration of whether or not we should, at least from a staff perspective, bring those applications forward to council for their guidance, I guess, with respect to how we might process those. And so we're working on that principle that if we have an application that's, for example, the heritage alteration permit application that is within the HCA, that we would bring that forward and bring that to a council meeting and have council give some direction on how we might further process that. So that's where we're at with respect to those. I just want to make the point that there would be a full review of the heritage elements of any application respecting what we refer to as a HAP. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. That really helps. Thank you.
Sorry, I was just going to say I've got to have one quick follow-up to just because I think a logical extension of Councillor Green's question is if that comes to council and council determines that they want to move it forward, but they want to get input from a committee, and so they would have to have a special meeting if that committee is, how would that be managed? Maybe this is probably not a question for Mr. Anderson, but how would that be managed with the wording of this motion as it sits? It seems like it's essentially prohibited under this motion that we have here. I'm just wondering if you might want to just change the wording to something like regularly scheduled committee meetings so that we have the ability to call special ones if we want. Ms.
Your
Varela?
Worship, thank you. So it really is a question of the support we could offer to the advisory body if council's recommendation was that they wanted to convene a special meeting. There is a certain amount of safety protocols that have to be developed. Access for the building has to be safely controlled, and there has to be a tech support. So right now, staff doesn't have capacity for that, but of course, if council deemed that to be a priority, which we don't see on the immediate horizon. Again, with the pandemic response, we're changing so rapidly that in a couple of weeks, that could be something that isn't, that doesn't seem as insurmountable as it does today in chambers just off the cuff. So at any time as we had enough capacity to start to bring committees and commissions back online, whether it was special at the call of council or it was just getting back to a regular schedule for council or by extension your advisory bodies, we would make that happen and come back to council for formal direction. So the short answer is if something happened before the EOC was deactivated and we found that capacity within the organization, we would strive to make that happen.
Okay, I just want to make sure that the wording as it sits, which is just that to suspend committee and commission meetings, which is a motion of council that wouldn't supersede, we wouldn't have to sort of rescind this motion to do a special if we decided that that was necessary for some reason. We wouldn't have to go through multiple steps to get back there. I was wondering if there's if this wording is appropriate, if we should maybe soften it in some way to make it a bit more clear that it's just the regular meetings are canceled, but it doesn't preclude us from calling one if council so sees fit. Sorry, council. I'm taking us on a little bit of a tangent here, but I think that that question sort of ties to that process of how we would go about this. And I had that concern of the wording being just so clear that it might preclude us from doing it. I'm just wondering if some simple language like just stipulating the regularly scheduled so that we have the ability to call a special, much like we do for council right now. And I'm going to either Ms. Hopkins or Ms. Varela as to in terms of her.
Your worship, staff would recommend that we amend the motion to say that staff be directed to temporarily suspend all committee and commission regular meetings until the district's emergency operations center is deactivated.
Okay. So, and that's up to council, of course, but I think that makes sense to me. If there's someone, we don't actually have, we do have a motion on the table right now. So it would be a motion to amend if people want to add that wording. Councillor Green.
I'll make the motion to amend to add that particular wording. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded. Any discussion on that amendment? Seeing none, I will, Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I feel more comfortable with this, having made the amendment to the motion, the original recommendation. But I do have some concern, and that is that, you know, we talked during the budget council meetings of certainly wanting to do things so we came out of pandemic with added strength and more resilient. And I just wonder how that will flow down to our committees and commissions who we were going through a review when all of this occurred, and certainly not through the fault of any intent by council or any intent or non-attention by staff. We've been disengaged with our committees and commissions now for some period of time, with the exceptions of a few that are still on. So we're having to, it sounds like a few of us are having to find a way to work effectively during this process to keep those conversations going and keep strength in those committees and active with those. But we have whole other groups that we really haven't communicated for some period of time. And I think for those committees and commissions to be effective and also come out of this strong, I fear that we will have to find a way. None of us know how long we are going to be in this suspended animation of sorts. And we are going to have to find a way of working with those groups somehow as we move forward. So although I feel more comfortable now that we have amended this, I still have strong concern that we're distancing ourselves too much from very important groups to whose recommendations council has always relied on and wants to continue to rely on in the future. So I'm hopeful that we can also get some thought process around what that might look like as this continues. And certainly we have God forbid that we're going on certainly past August, that we're definitely coming back in September with a revamped program to continue effectively working with our committees and commissions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Patterson. I think Ms. Varela just wanted to comment.
Thank you, Your Worship. So as councillors are aware, the EOC and the senior leadership team are working diligently behind the scenes to create solutions as part of recovery planning. Those efforts have really gone along quite seamlessly to bring council meetings back into play to accommodate new processes such as tax season, things like that. But we also know that we're supposed to be working on council's priorities. In the meeting that Councillor Patterson referred to, there were 18 action items behind the scenes related to committees and commissions as part of that report. And so staff is actually gaining traction on those. And as council has been advised, we are looking for Q2 reporting for the district, which will be finance and the work plan, being presented in a public meeting in July. So again, lots of work behind the scenes. We understand how council prioritizes its advisory bodies, but we do have to make sure when those meetings come back online, they're done safely with protocols in place, access to building anticipated. So lots of work behind the scenes, but certainly your EOC and your senior leadership team are making great strides in advancing those kinds of decisions right across the multiple departments.
Thank you, Ms. Varela. I think one of the concerns I heard in Councillor Patterson was just communicating well with those bodies, because they are volunteers, and ensuring that we have we're being clear about what our process and timelines are and stuff. So I think we can manage that as well. And I'll follow up with staff to make sure that we actually have a bit more communication. There was a letter that went out a few weeks ago, just informing people that we had to defer the end time of this current slate of committees because of this, and ask if they were able to hang on a bit longer. And so we'll do some more communication as well, I think is appropriate. So thank you, Councillor Patterson, because you're right. We have a bunch of volunteers there who want to work and aren't able to right now. Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm a bit of a stickler for procedure, so I just need to ask a question through to our keeper of the rules, procedure rules. In our procedures bylaw, there is no real reference to special council meeting. There's no reference to a special committee or commissions meeting. So by adding the word regular in here, could someone explain to me what that allows us to do with respect to the committees and commissions? And I'm wondering whether we have to say or add potentially further amendment or at the call of the mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka, for asking the question. I will give that to Ms. Hopkins if that wording regular needs to be amended in some way to make it clear what we're talking about.
Thank you, Your Worship. So that actually upper levels of legislation, the Community Charter and the Local Government Act allow council to call special meetings. So one thing that we're required to do, and I'll get to the committees after this, is that we have to advertise an annual schedule of regular meetings. Council is able to call special meetings as needed. And the committees and commissions also are required to have a regular schedule of meetings so that people can anticipate when and where things may be discussed. And then they're also given by extension the opportunity to call a special meeting should the need arise. And that's the distinction between saying that your regular schedule is canceled or suspended, I should say, sorry. And allowing special meetings to be called as needed for urgent business usually.
A follow-up, if I may. So related to that, for committees and commissions, if this is going to allow them to have special meetings, which makes sense, are these meetings called at the pleasure of the chair of that committee or commission, or does that have to involve, for example, the mayor?
I'll give that to staff, but I believe it has to go through council or through staff. But Ms. Hopkins?
Special meetings are called working in collaboration with the chair and staff.
Thank you. Good to have that clarification. Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Any other comments or questions? The motion right now is to amend to include the word regular to this, so we can get back to the main motion if there's no more concerns about that wording of the word regular. So not seeing any hands sticking up, I will call the question. This is to amend the original motion to include the word regular in front of the meetings. Oh, sorry, commission meetings until there's, yes. Is that correct? All regular committee meetings? All regular meetings. Oh, sorry, committee and commission regular meetings. Got it. That's the wording. Okay, so that's in front of us. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Okay, thank you very much. So we're back to the main motion now amended for discussion. Is there any further discussion on the main motion of, yes, go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would still be, I have issue with the length of suspension being during the operation of the EOC, and with clear and very direct recognition that staff are essentially overtasked at this moment operating the EOC, and I understand why that language is in there. I would still feel more comfortable if there was a timeline, even if it was a fairly extended one, applied to to revisiting, to reviewing the suspension in light of how much things change just in the course of a month or two. So I don't want to put an excess burden on staff to be bringing this back over and over and over again. But if I might propose an amendment to the motion that a review of the suspension take place at the beginning of September 2020.
So sorry, the wording would be, as it is, District Emergency Operations Center is deactivated, or the end of September, whichever comes earlier. Is that
whichever would be earliest? Well, I proposed the beginning of September with the.
Oh, sorry, beginning of September. Okay.
It would. I would say, a couple of months or a 3-month time frame would make sense, with the understanding that we generally don't meet in August, but we may be meeting on an unusual schedule this year. I'm just trying to come up with some kind of appropriate time scale that isn't onerous for staff, but still allows us an actual date for revisiting it. So, so I would propose that the amendment be that staff be directed to suspend all regular committee and commission meetings until the district's emergency operations center is deactivated, or by September the 4th, whichever the first date is coming back from the long weekend, or whichever is earlier.
Okay. Second. So we have, well, we just can we give a date of, say, September 10th or something, so we know it's well past that time? Just give a date. That way we know we can meet before that meeting if we have to extend it, basically. Can I just suggest that September 10th or something as a date?
I would propose.
Yeah, Labor Day is the 7th.
Okay, I would propose September the 8th.
Okay, September the 8th, okay.
Or the deactivation of the EOC, whichever is sooner.
Just give me a second. I'm gonna give it. So it's moved and seconded for September the 8th, but I'm just gonna just have staff just have a quick look at that date to make sure that it kind of works. Sorry, I'm just having staff having a quick look at the dates to see what would happen. Is feasible to kind of bring it back to council for consideration. If you needed to extend it, is really the concern here, right? Is the piece. So,
Your Worship, with the agenda deadlines and the long weekend and the no meetings through August, staff are respectfully requesting that the proposed date be moved to September 15th.
September 15th. Okay, so the week after, basically, Labor Day. But it's up to council as to whether or not that's acceptable to them. So we have a motion right now for September 8th. Councillor Appleton is the mover of the motion. Go ahead.
I can I would, as the mover, I would be willing to revise my motion to indicate the date of September the 15th.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Councillor Braithwaite was the seconder, so she's okay with that. Okay, so the motion on the floor right now then is that until the Emergency Operations Center is evacuated, with the words added, or September 15th, whichever comes early, 2020, whichever date occurs earlier. Okay, perfect. So we have that pretty clear on the record. Thank you. Thank you. So we have so this is an amendment motion. So we're going to speak to that amendment of adding those words. Is there any other discussion, people, on that motion? I'm not seeing any. All right, then I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed? We've got a streak going, Councillor Appleton, of having motions, having unanimous support. Don't give it up. You have the floor still, so that motion passes. But you had the motion. You had the floor when that motion was made. So if you wish to speak to anything else, you're more than welcome to on the main motion.
No, thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate staff's indulgence on that. Again, just to reiterate, it has nothing to do with not understanding that staff are seriously, entrained in operating the EOC, but the motivation behind that is just the uncertainty around when the EOC might be deactivated. I don't think anybody has a really clear idea of what that might be. So, yeah, I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other discussion, Councillor Zelka?
Thank you very much. So just with respect to the specific question that was in the correspondence relating to the HCA, since we will allow special committees and commissions and and there is a timeline to this. I presume that since there, as the letter suggests, that there are active building projects underway in the HCA area, should the need arise, that the various committees or commissions or the actions will be brought to the advisory body in some way. And I just wanted to ensure that there was a process there, or at the very least, it would come back to council for us to address.
All right, I thought I unmuted myself, but I muted myself. I'll let Mr. Anderson confirm this, but just I think it's important to note that all building applications, including those in the HCA, are intended to go forward, that heritage aspects like HCA are included in that. And for what Mr. Anderson said, those will come to council. And I think this is important because there's a couple of things that aren't just the land use application, but the actual ability to provide a safe environment for the committees to meet. So those sort of EOC level policy procedural pieces that need to be considered when council makes that decision, whether or not to refer and to call a special piece, would have to come from this table. So I believe that double-headed approval is going to be required for any of these if we decide to refer them. But Mr. Anderson, can you confirm that process?
Yes, Your Worship. As I'd indicated, should we have permit applications that require a heritage alteration permit in the prospect area, we would take those applications through to a point where we could present information to council for some direction on whether or not they needed to have a further review by, for example, the Heritage Commission. So that's the process we would be undertaking. I should also maybe note for council's information that the current activity that is in the prospect area is under approved permits. And so those activities that we see out there now are not ones that would require us to consider a HAP related to those construction activities, just for your information.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Is that satisfactory, Councillor Zelka? All right, thank you. Any other questions here? We have a twice amended motion for regular committee and commission meetings, and to set an end date as well, to give some clarity. Is there any other discussions on this motion as it stands? I'm not seeing any. I'm happy to call the question. I would just say I appreciate the added clarity provided by both those motions. I think it makes it easier for all of us and anticipates an uncertain future, gives us some certainty in terms of our going forward process. So thank you for that. With that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. So we are going to move next to adjournment. We are adjourning in camera, and so in this, we have to have the entirety of this in-camera resolution read aloud. So if someone would do so, I think I see Councillor Braithwaite's microphone off. So go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
I'll move that in accordance with sections 91A and B of the Community Charter, that the open portion of the meeting of council be adjourned and that a closed session be convened to discuss personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for position as an officer, employee, or agent of the municipality or another position appointed by the municipality, and personal information about an identifiable individual who is being considered for a municipal award or honor, or who has offered to provide a gift to the municipality on condition of anonymity.
All right, need a seconder? Seconded, thank you very much. I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, not opposed. And just to remind you and everybody at home, we will be signing off from this this session, and there is a dial-up phone number provided that we will all be calling into to do that the next meeting. So it is currently 3:14. I'm going to ask that we reconvene at 3:18. So give ourselves 4 minutes to get out of here. Maybe, okay, 3:20, how's that? At 3:20, so that people can have a chance to get a bit of a bio break and maybe a bite to eat, and then we'll come back, and hopefully the in-camera won't last too long. See you in a few minutes.